Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. I have chat system and become Batman's teacher at start. Chapter 41. On a cloudy and warm morning in Gotham City, some cold winds and humid fog climbed from the cracks in the windows to the balcony, condensing a series of small water droplets, shining brightly under the light. Schiller was sitting in his own seat in the office, looking at the papers of the students. After a while, a document was thrown from the table next door. Schiller looked away from the homework in his hand and turned to read the paper. Document. Prohibition on campus. What kind of trouble is this little genius causing himself? Schiller asked. His colleague, Anna, stood in front of the water dispenser, waiting for the water to be connected, while Akimbo said, "Obviously, it's our talented new principal. It's not so much a genius as a genius." Before Schiller could continue to ask her, Mrs. Murphy, the assistant to the principal, moved her somewhat bloated body and knocked on the door to come in. She said, "Professor Schiller, the principal is looking for you." As soon as Schiller stood up, Mrs. Murphy walked up to him, gently patted his arm, and whispered, "He's so boring, you'd better be careful." Schiller came to the president's office. The new president came a few days ago. His name is Selden. Selden Smith is a white man who supports the Donkey Party. I heard that he was the leader of the Academic Affairs Office of Princeton University, and I don't know why. I can't think of it. I want to come to Gotham University to be the president. As soon as Schiller walked in, Selden tapped the table, motioned him to sit down. He was a very typical white leader. He looked energetic, like a lion, and he said, "I think you should have seen me documents issued. Yes, alcohol prohibition on campus is imperative. I really don't know how this school can allow the brewery's car to drive directly to the school gate. This is ridiculous. If this is a mess left by the original principal, then I will definitely clean it up, right now. You know, in this case, we have to take a tough attitude. According to your resume, Professor Schiller, I think it's not harder to deal with a group of children than to deal with those serial killers." Schiller heard what he meant. "Although I want to be a new officer, you have to be a gunman for me." Schiller smiled and said, "Of course, of course." Then his tone cooled down a little, and he said, "In fact, dealing with anyone in this world is no more difficult than dealing with those lunatic serial murderers." The principal heard the warning in his tone. He was not stupid, at least smarter than the original principal. He said, "I have heard about the disturbance in the school before, but it has nothing to do with me. A new order is needed here, and new managers are needed." Schiller smiled and said, "Your ambition is very ambitious. To establish a new order in Gotham, I almost applaud for this goal. It's not Gotham, it's Gotham University. This is going to be my turf. I don't want to say anything polite about being responsible for the students. I just want to say that the former president was a cowardly idiot, so he got out, but I'm not like him." As he spoke, he made various radical gestures, and from time to time, depending on the accent, he pinched his fingertips together to knock on the table, typical of American politicians. Schiller glanced at his watch and said, "My class is about to start, but since it's a task that the new principal gave me, I will definitely complete it successfully." After speaking, he left. The new principal stared at his back. His face was not good. His intuition told him that this person was not so easy to deal with. The next day, a notice of withdrawal was delivered to Bruce Wayne's desk. It reads, "Because you have repeatedly drank alcohol on campus and organized parties containing alcoholic beverages, it has been verified that at least 50 students have drank the alcoholic beverages you paid for. I have to regret to inform you, Mr. Wayne, your student status will be cancelled and you must move out of the student housing within 3 days. Professor Schiller Rodriguez." The next day, Selden was clutching his forehead in the office. He could tell he was a little flustered, and he said to Schiller, "I don't want tough. Oh yes, tough, but, I mean say, it's not this tough, it's too tough." The new principal cursed inwardly. What kind of lunatic is this? How dare he write a withdrawal notice for the heir to the Wayne family? This is the biggest sponsor of Gotham University. Sponsoring Gotham University billions of dollars a year. If there is no Wayne, his principal would be a piece of shit. And I heard that Bruce has been fooling around all the time, very unattractive, and he doesn't seem like a good person to get along with. Is he really not afraid of offending the richest man in the world?" Schiller, still smiling with no emotion, said, "I don't think it's not enough to overdo it. and if we even fire Bruce Wayne, there's absolutely no way anyone will disobey your prohibition, isn't it? Selden opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything. Now it's hard for him to describe his complicated feelings. He can't find words to refute Schiller. In fact, what Schiller said makes too much sense. In the whole Gotham University, the person who can drink the most, dare to drink during the day, and dare to go crazy in school after drinking, isn't it Bruce Wayne? And Schiller was right. If Bruce was expelled, the other students were guaranteed to be as good as quails. But the question is, which private university president dares to fire his own board chairman? The principal didn't dare, but Schiller dared. He wished Bruce would get out of here quickly, otherwise Gotham University would get a clown one day, and it would be another big trouble. Selden wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, "First of all, let's take back this notice of withdrawal. I never take back the letter I wrote, but as the principal, you can call and ask him to deliver the letter to my office in person." Schiller also tapped on the table like Selden. "Mr. Principal, I'm a teacher, do you expect me to nod and bow to the students who make mistakes? How to please the board is the principal's job, not mine. My job is to educate people. I don't care if he is Wayne or not. No one can go wild in my class. By the way, help me tell him that if I smell any trace of alcohol in my class in the future, I will kick him out directly. Don't blame me for not reminding him." Crazy, Selden thought. What kind of lunatic is Schiller? Why is he always having trouble with Bruce? That's the richest man in the world. I was shocked by your stubbornness. After a while, Selden said with a gloomy face, "I hope you can keep your stubborn style." Schiller smiled and said, "I will. In fact, in countless major crimes, I have faced those wicked psychopaths and lunatics. Compared to them, Bruce is like a newborn pony call. I hope he'd better get up in front of me before he learns to run." The principal looked at Schiller. Schiller's face was a little morbidly pale. Those gray eyes, hidden behind the lenses, seemed to be covered with an inexhaustible gray fog. After Schiller left, the principal pressed the switch of the recorder under the table. He thought, a scoundrel can't bear such a teacher insulting him so much. What Schiller said today, it's better to engrave on the tombstone. If a notice of withdrawal from school is not enough to make Bruce angry, then he will add more code. I wonder how Bruce will feel after listening to these recordings. Selden thought, no matter what kind of ability Schiller has, he will never be able to compete with the power of capital. There are 10,000 ways for the Wayne family to make a professor disappear from the world. Even if Bruce wasn't that cruel, he wouldn't make it easier for someone who insults him over and over again. After Bruce received this recording, his expression was very strange. He was not angry. Yes, he was not angry at all. In fact, even if this person is not Schiller, Bruce will not be too angry, because he is not as impulsive and reckless as he has shown. But after listening to the recording, he actually felt relieved. Fortunately, Schiller didn't throw him some headaches and difficult to answer questions again, and he didn't use the kind of more serious questions when he usually chased Bruce for homework. Bad tone. Bruce knew that this kind of reaction was wrong. How could his requirements be so low? Shouldn't it be Schiller's compliments that would make him happier? No, what's the point? Bruce threw the recorder on the table and scratched his hair. He had to admit that after listening to it, he couldn't help but think that maybe Batman did a good job in Gotham recently, so the professor's attitude changed. Of course, he was Batman after all, and soon, he began to think about business. It seems that the principal did not aim at Schiller in this way. He seemed to have some additional information channels, and he could know that Schiller participated in the trial of the previous principal. Bruce narrowed his eyes, wanting to create order at Gotham University. Rather, he wanted to turn Gotham University into a hall of his own, and a dangerous person like Schiller was naturally his first target. The next day, Schiller went to class as usual. Without even looking at Bruce, he picked up the textbook and started teaching. Selden, who was able to mobilize the classroom camera, couldn't help frowning. Bruce didn't bother to go to Schiller. What was going on? Bruce, disguised as a playboy, has gotten into trouble a lot. He beat up several of his classmates alone. Although it is wrong to beat a professor, for the richest man in the world, there is no one he can't beat. There is no one who he can't afford to beat up. Then he saw an even more incredible scene. When he was collecting his homework, Bruce actually handed in a stack of paper, and depending on the thickness, he probably really wrote enough 3,000 words. When did Bruce turn in his homework? Which professor at Gotham University dares to accept his homework? Which course does Gotham University have? Dare you not give him full marks? Thinking of this, the principal opened Gotham University's credit system. He found that in Schiller's psychology class, Bruce's homework was less than 2 points, and the overall grade was at the bottom. The column for teacher comments read, "As a rich man, he is indeed enjoying life with due diligence, but as a student, he is really bad." The principal's hands are shaking a little. This is not an internal website, but a website that all students must visit at the end of the semester. They can clearly see the comments of each professor to them, and you can leave comments for all professors. The principal thought this. He turned the mouse wheel down, and then he saw that Bruce's comment to Schiller was, "I promise I will finish all my homework next semester. If I do, can I get 2 points for my homework? Or maybe 1.8, if I can get over 90 on my final exam. I hope that my credits will not be deducted completely, even if only 1 point is deducted." Isn't this a copy of Teacher, Kai Kai, Lao Lao? With a dark face, the principal turned off the computer with a snap. His heart was full of grievances. How many people wanted to join the Wayne Group, which would bring them huge benefits, and of course the principal was one of them. But it seems that he has no chance. Bruce doesn't care whether he is the president of Gotham University or not. The president is just a position that he can change if he wants. But it seems that Professor Schiller really managed the richest man in the world. Selden thought, no matter what, he must get rid of Schiller, and to go further, he must have an irreplaceable in Bruce. Status: Schiller is his biggest stumbling block. On the other hand, Bruce began to be dissatisfied with the new principal. Because when he went to return the withdrawal notice to Schiller, Schiller almost wrote the words, "Get out of here," on his face. Before the new principal came, everything went smoothly. Whether it was the communication with Schiller or the cooperation with Gordon, it was very beneficial to the socialization of Batman's career. As a result, the new principal suddenly came up with some kind of prohibition, and Schiller found an excuse to let him drop out. Of course, Bruce would feel dissatisfied. In any case, the new principal's campus alcohol ban is still being implemented in an orderly manner. Any vehicles and shops selling alcoholic beverages are not allowed to appear near Gotham University. All parties will be checked, and the dormitory will also be searched, but they will not confiscate high-power electrical appliances, but will take all the wine was turned out, and then the students were severely recorded. Of course, these students have no ability to resist. Although Gotham University has a big villain, the Scarecrow, most of the students are still obedient. But obviously, this also moved other people's cakes. Everyone knows what kind of city Gotham is. The drunks here don't start drinking after work. Tens of thousands of alcoholics in Gotham City feed the countless bars and shops selling alcohol, and the annual sales of tobacco and alcohol are the bulk of the tax. Of course you can stop the students from drinking, but if they are not addicted to alcohol, who will the wine merchants sell to? Students are so deceiving. Any hobby they pick up during this period may stay with them for the rest of their lives, and drinking is no exception. If they started drinking from the age of 20, they would spend tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on alcohol in their lifetime, and each alcoholic spends more than half of his salary on various types of alcohol. And the profits from selling alcohol are looted by those monopolies, who use these profits to continue production, and then open larger factories to hire the alcoholics at lower wages, at the cost of providing them with 2 after get-off work bottles of poor quality wine. What a perfect industry chain this is, and all they need to do is put some delicious beer at a low price near Gotham University, regardless of profit, of course. Start with beer, then distilled alcohol and spirits. For hundreds of years, Gotham City has operated like this. If you don't let those people bring bad students, won't Gotham become a civilized city with simple folk customs? Schiller was very aware of this, so he never intended to be a good teacher here due to his duties. The city does not allow any clean seedlings to grow, because only the wicked and criminals can survive here. Make Gotham a utopia. No kidding, that unworldly grad doesn't survive a year in Gotham City. This is just a big vortex, surrounded by countless small vortices, no one can escape. Since Schiller's withdrawal notice was sent to Brusna, the principal seldom talked about letting him participate in this matter, but he was under a lot of pressure because of the chain of interests, and he had to find another helper for himself. Hello, my name is Harvey Dante, a lawyer. My main focus is criminal prosecution and adjudication. Schiller and Harvey shook hands, and before Schiller could speak, Harvey said, I've heard of you. You've done a great job in the city. That serial killer has been brought to justice, and now still in jail. He speaks very fast, like a lawyer, and in a calm, firm tone, and then he continued, but I have to say, you didn't do as well as you did in those big cases when it came to prohibition at Gotham University, and I think saving the future of this city, it's just as important as catching criminals, isn't it? As soon as Schiller released his hand, he pursed his lips and said, maybe so. Harvey heard the reluctance in his tone. He frowned and said, I heard some of your deeds in the South, but it seems that you are not as jealous of evil as you say in the rumors. More than this, I want to know, who is spreading my story? Harvey was stunned for a moment, then he said, didn't you say it yourself? He looked up and down Schiller. Schiller didn't look like anything, a shrewd and brave detective, and not an impartial judge. He looked very gentle and fit his professional temperament. Harvey was very smart. He said, you mean someone is spreading your story on purpose? But why would they do it? To make a name for you. What good is it? Schiller asked Harvey to sit down, and he sat across from him, and he said, maybe you only know the first half of the story, and then I was plotted against someone in a case in the metropolis, otherwise why would I come here? Gotham. That's not a good thing. Obviously, these people don't want to let me go right now. Harvey was stunned for a moment. He said, sorry, then you really shouldn't be in the limelight, but it doesn't matter. I am now the legal counsel of Gotham University. I support this prohibition. It's nothing to drink. Of course I also drink, but drinking heavily as a student is not acceptable. When Harvey speaks, he always speaks clearly and logically, and his tone is very firm, giving people an unconscious sense of security. He would never have associated him with the coin-flipping lunatic if Schiller hadn't known that he was the later Two-Faced Man. Two-Faced Man is a very complicated villain, and he is also the only villain that Batman has tried to save. Batman has tried many times, but without success. Maybe this setback to him is stronger than being defeated by the Joker. Because of Harvey Dante, he is really a good man, the Knight of Light in Gotham City. Batman was so influenced by him that Maroni heard Harvey in court and drove him crazy, which made Batman completely realize that there is no violence, no authority, law and judgment or nothing. A despicable and dirty criminal hurt a fair prosecutor in public, but he didn't have to pay any price, and no one dared to try him again. Schiller put his hands on the table, looked Harvey in the eyes and said, Mr. Harvey, I think you know the situation here better than the new headmaster, and you should know how many people's interests you will be offending. Quote, I know, but I don't care, Harvey said. Schiller sighed. He took off his glasses and began to wipe them with a glasses cloth. As he wiped, he said, perhaps you are really ready to accept the price of justice. It sounds like you feel deeply. Of course, because my life is big. Then I'm sure, so am I, Harvey said, but he was still empathetic, saying, I don't blame people who give up on this road because of all the dangers, because they have actually done it. Best, I don't know how far I can go on this road, but in this world, you don't have to go to the end in order to win. Schiller didn't answer any further. He shook hands with Harvey again, and Harvey left. For the first time, Schiller didn't try to use words to interfere with the other party, or insist on persuading the other party. Schiller once heard a very reasonable saying, don't try to remind a person who has been walking in the dark that the other person is not blind. So Schiller won't try to correct Harvey's thoughts. He won't tell him that your actions are useless to Gotham, that everything Harvey does is right, every choice he makes it's all right and right, but alas, this is Gotham. The Light Knight can't save Gotham, and neither can the Dark Knight. Harvey is indeed a very contagious person. He is not like Daredevil Matt, who likes to fight alone. He is very good at using all the resources he can get in touch with, and getting along with teachers and students, even various employees. He was full of praise, and Mrs. Murphy praised him more than a dozen times a day, and wanted to introduce her little daughter to him. Even the vast majority of students, although they didn't like that the wine they had hidden was confiscated, they still admired Harvey and thought he was the kind of elite who had a successful career and was very kind. Harvey only came to Gotham University a few days ago, and he was welcomed by the vast majority of people. The new principal, Selden, became even more depressed. He was looking for someone to be a gun instead of turning himself into a gun. He just wanted to find a scapegoat, so that the scapegoat could charge in front, and he could gain fame and fortune. But just like Schiller's being too tough, Harvey was so popular that he stole almost all the limelight from him. Few people know the name of the new principal, but almost everyone knows that the new legal advisor, Harvey Dent, is a highly educated, high-income, and enthusiastic elite lawyer. And among the people who get along with him, there are also the most difficult Schiller and Bruce. Schiller is willing to chat with him about their ideals in life, because their education level is similar, and they were all Columbia University alumni. You can recall the campus together time. As for Bruce, he felt that he and Harvey had a special affinity. They could talk about everything. In terms of justice, Harvey gave him a lot of different perspectives, which greatly inspired Batman. In the past, Schiller's all-comprehension type dialogue had made Batman used to being stimulated first, and then he went back to think silently. But Harvey is different. Harvey will answer all of Bruce's questions in detail as much as possible. www.mtlnovel.com. When Bruce puts forward different views, he will not sarcastically retort, will not disturb the rhythm of his speech, but after listening quietly, after expressing your own views, carefully analyze the differences between your own views and his own. If you cannot reach an agreement, then reserve your views and talk about it next time. No one would dislike a friend like this, intelligent, sophisticated, enthusiastic, compassionate and knowledgeable, which is much better than going to Schiller's gas for 10 years. Schiller is also very happy, because with Harvey, Bruce will finally stop bothering him every day, and the psychological consultation room is finally quiet. Except for Gordon's visit in the next few days, there was hardly anyone here. Gordon came to send him an invitation letter. After all, he was promoted, and he jumped several levels in a row. This is a great thing to celebrate. Gordon doesn't have many friends, and his colleagues in the police station are a little bit red-eyed. Bruce introduced Harvey to the cop, and the two hit it off. In a sense, Harvey and Gordon are the best partners. They are really similar, but Harvey is more aggressive, while Gordon be more conservative. The two had a heated fight, and Bruce was left out in the cold. Schiller held a glass of wine and looked at Bruce, who was standing outside the psychological clinic. He said, "Let me see, this homeless underwater dog. I finally remembered the garbage dump where he used to live. Should I be honored?" "Hey, don't say that," Bruce said. "Although Harvey is very good, I think you are better taught in terms of professional ability. Thank you for your compliment, but your credits this semester must be deducted." That's it. Since that night, she has to run to that block every time. It's just too dangerous. I don't know how to dissuade her, because she doesn't like Bruce at all, and has pushed in my date, but I clearly. Schiller poured himself a little champagne and said, "Walking to Gotham slums for several nights in a row without encountering any danger, are you sure she's just an ordinary person?" Bruce wiped his face and said, "This is what worries me the most. If she's just an ordinary girl, it's fine, but if she's not an ordinary person and follows me every day, what else can I do? And this matter, we have to start from the last case." After Jonathan's case was solved, Bruce didn't completely remove himself, or Batman encountered other troubles. Last time, Batman rescued Christine from the gangster who kidnapped him. He thought Christine was passed out, but who knew she was conscious? From that day on, this beautiful girl loved on to Batman. Yes, it's Batman, not Bruce. She even turned down a date with Bruce a few days later, and every night, went to the block where she was kidnapped to see if Batman would continue to appear. In a sense, you should be happy, because Batman's charm has made her even get rid of the richest man in the world. Bruce opened his mouth. His expression was very complicated. Being liked by a beautiful girl, of course, is very pleasing, but this thing is too bizarre and weird. A girl fell in love with him, but because she fell in love with him, she dumped another him. If this matter is written in love in a novel, number 100,000 words are absolutely unclear. I don't have any advice to give you about your personal feelings, except to protect your kidneys. Finally, Schiller said. Bruce did not expect that Schiller's prediction would come true so quickly. That night, Batman was still patrolling Gotham. He was famous in Gotham recently because he swept the slums around Mawson's block. This time, the places he patrolled were not those dirty slums, but the luxury neighborhoods where robberies often happened. In fact, the probability of serious crimes here is no less than that in the slums, because the slums are often full of drunkards fighting, gang extortion or crowds fighting, but in a robbery in a luxury block, once the gun is fired, there will be at least 2 or 3 people falling in a pool of blood. The clerk of the luxury store is also likely to be killed. The vile nature of this case is no less than the gang fight in the slum. Moreover, those who dare to do this kind of case are often experienced veterans. They cooperate with each other, plan carefully, and leave after robbing them, which is very difficult to deal with. Batman has already attacked 2 robbery gangs, and it can be considered that they are unlucky. Batman has just been upgraded. When he came here from the slum, he encountered a robbery and murder case. They killed 2 female shop assistants and robbed them. The jewelry in the store, and more coincidentally, a string of pearl necklaces just happened to be scattered on the ground. So the robbery gang is now in jail. And the other one wasn't too strong either. A group of budding thieves was hit by Batman, and now they're going to jail. On this day, Batman was standing on the roof of a building opposite a jewelry store. He watched a dark figure get in through the window of the back door of the jewelry store. When she reacted, she fainted. It seemed that it should be a female thief. Yes, it was a thief, not a robber. Instead of breaking the glass of the jewelry cabinet, she found the key from the clerk and opened the glass door of the jewelry counter. Just as she was holding a gem to admire the luster on it, a shadow appeared behind her, and he said, "Miss, no matter how you look at it, this gem does not belong to you." As soon as she turned around, her eyes darkened, and she was knocked unconscious. And the female thief had better luck. Just when Batman wanted to drag her and hand her over to the police, a group of robbers rushed into the antique shop opposite. They were the real robbers, wearing hoods and holding submachine guns, with sacks, and gunning the clerks into the corner. Batman had to put down the female thief first and deal with them, but when he came back, she was gone. However, things didn't end there. In the next few days, Batman always felt that someone was following him, but the other party seemed to be agile, and Batman didn't grab his tail several times. Until one day, Batman designed a small trap. He pretended to throw a bag of gems that a robber had just grabbed into the trash can on the street corner. Sure enough, the petite figure sneaked into the trash can. Picking up something, Batman grabbed her cape, but unexpectedly the female thief returned with a paw, and Batman almost broke. When she saw it was Batman, the female thief was relieved. Batman crossed his arms and asked, "Gem, huh? Don't you think our ears are a good match?" Her voice was sweet, and after she finished speaking, she flicked the ears on her head with her fingers. Yes, she also has 2 ears on her mask, although not as good as Batman's, it is so sharp, but the position is really similar, all on the top of the head. Batman said mysteriously, "Are you another bat?" "Bat," the female thief said in an incredible tone. "Who is a bat?" "I'm a Catwoman. Don't only cats have ears like this? Do you think you're a bat? But what eccentric people think of themselves as that? Animal. Catwoman." Batman scrutinized the name, then he fished out the bag of gems in the trash, threw it to her, and said, "No cat likes gems, stop going for gems. The store is embarrassing the clerk. For the sake of not killing you, I will let you go." After he finished speaking, he turned around and was about to leave, but Catwoman grabbed the cape. Catwoman smiled and shook the bag in her hand. She said, "Rich man, you must still have this thing, right?" Batman frowned. He didn't know why everyone could see he had money. He has obviously changed his bat suit to be very low-key, and has not used any more advanced drugs, and even trimmed his beard a little bit crookedly. Batman didn't turn around. He just turned around and said, "I don't have it anymore. You can't expect a bat to have such a thing." Just as he was about to leave, a whip rolled around his waist. Batman didn't feel any force pulling him, but a soft body pressed against his back, and he heard Catwoman say into his ear, "If you're a bat, you're the funniest bat I've ever seen, and we'll see you again." After speaking, she jumped directly to the wall of an alley and disappeared quickly. Batman touched his ear. He thought, "A cat that likes gems. Really weird. Same as myself." Unexpectedly, on the way back to the city, he met Christine again, the beautiful head of the cheerleading group, wearing a thick down jacket and hat, covering up his body and beautiful face, that as soon as Shaw saw her, he wanted to avoid her, but after thinking about it, he still went up and had to persuade her to go back. It was too dangerous for such a girl to appear on the streets of Gotham at midnight. Christine saw Batman and ran over happily, but as soon as she ran to him, she frowned and asked, "Do you have a girlfriend? Did you go on a date with her?" Batman didn't know why. He just said, "Don't stay here, you know how dangerous it is." "But I just want to be your girlfriend." Christine shrugged, and it could be seen that she didn't say this very often, because usually only other people confessed to her. Batman said, "I don't need a girlfriend, go back quickly." "Then what's with the Louis Vuitton perfume on you? Don't tell me you like women's fragrances." Batman felt a headache. He who has been in the flowers all the year round, how could he have no understanding of these things? He knew that he was hugged by Catwoman just now, but he did not expect that this female thief came out in the middle of the night to steal something and sprayed such a strong perfume. Batman said nothing, flung his cape and left. Although Batman doesn't want to deal with Christine, there is one person who is very interested in her, and that is the new Principal Selden. Don't forget, it was Christine who came forward to testify that the old principal kidnapped her. This is the biggest evidence to convict the former principal. www.mtlnovel.com. Selden knows that the old principal and Victor involved in the Jonathan case stepped down. There must be a behind-the-scenes mastermind in this whole thing to connect them, because there are too many mysteries here that have not been solved. Who is Jonathan? Who rescued Christine? Gordon alone is no play. Selden believes that even if Christine is unfamiliar with the people behind the scenes, he must know who he is. He also wants to understand this issue and understand the series of relationships involved in the Jonathan case, so that he can safely sit on this location. Gotham's relationship is too complicated to gain a firm foothold here. A good entry point is essential. Selden believes that the Jonathan case is the best subject to investigate. On the other hand, the relationship between Batman and Catwoman is progressing rapidly. Maybe there is fate in this world. Catwoman's liveliness and romance have nothing to do with Batman's serious and suspicious, but he is fascinated by her. The two often wandered together in Gotham at night. Although Catwoman can't help Batman fight, her ability to sneak in and watch is first class. Catwoman likes all kinds of gems and jewelry, and Batman has money. But on the topic of theft, they always can't talk about it. Batman thinks Catwoman has a kleptomania, but Catwoman thinks that she just likes those jewels. Since they are placed on the counter by others and no one buys them, then take them. Enjoy it for a few days, no problem. Finally one day, Batman followed Catwoman and stopped her from stealing again. Catwoman was completely annoyed by him. During the dispute between the two, Batman didn't act ruthlessly because of Lian Xiangxiu, but Catwoman was moody and she fanned out. He slapped Batman and stabbed him in the side with a short dagger. So, this peach crisis about Batman turned into a real kidney crisis. Bruce was lying on the hospital bed, and Harvey raised his upper body a little, then poured him a glass of water. Bruce said with some distress, "She is cloudy, moody, and really looks like a cat. I can't figure out her, and now I just worry that her irritability will hurt others. After all, I have the most in all Gotham. Good medical resources, but others may not. You should be glad that you didn't have a ruptured kidney. The dagger was very short, leaving only a shallow scratch on your organs, otherwise you would only have one kidney left now." Harvey put down the jug and said, "I had a girl I liked when I was in school, and I was crazy about her. I had a passionate pursuit of her, and one day, when we were going on a date, she wanted to tease her. A cleaner deliberately throws the bottle far away. I thought at the time, how could she do this? She's so bad, she doesn't deserve my liking. But then I thought about it, it was my love for her that shaped her into a perfect person in my mind. People, in fact, she has always been so bad-tempered, likes to ridicule others, and looks down on anyone in the service industry. She has never changed herself, but because of my strong love, I have infinite expectations for her." Quote, "I broke up with her, and she felt inexplicable. I didn't know it at the time. I really looked like a lunatic. First, I desperately pursued her and confessed to her, but suddenly and neatly proposed to break up. It looked like a humiliation, so she was very angry. After thinking about it, this is normal." Bruce felt a little ashamed to talk about it, but he still said, that girl's problem is much more serious than your ex-girlfriend, and it may hurt others, the physical kind. The problem is not here, the problem is when you knew her and fell in love with her. Didn't you know this problem? Bruce thought, doesn't he know? He knew it all too well, he even knew Catwoman on the way to her crime. He couldn't help but think a little ridiculously, how could he possibly fall in love with a criminal? Or at her crime scene? After Harvey left, Bruce fell asleep because of drowsiness. In the dream, the brilliant lights of the jewelry store illuminated the string of pearl necklaces scattered on the ground. Suddenly all the lights went out, as if everything went back to that dark alley, only the string of pearl necklaces was shining faintly of luster. Batman has never liked any jewelry, especially anything that sparkles like a real bat. But all he could think about was the girl with the shining gem and the sly smile. In the haze, the luster of pearls in his memory suddenly became less terrifying. At the end of the dream, a group of shadowy bats streaked across the sky. The next day, when Schiller saw Bruce in the counseling room, he was quite surprised. He looked Bruce up and down and said, "You're healed. Can you walk so soon?" "Actually, it still hurts a bit, but it doesn't matter. My internal organs were not seriously injured, and they are almost healed now." Schiller said, "It looks like you don't have to waste my cup of coffee." Then he just poured himself a cup of hot coffee. Bruce was speechless. He said, "Bring me a glass of water." After the two sat down, Bruce said, "Harvey still doesn't know my true identity. I think it's better not to tell him first, but I'm very distressed now that the female thief who gave me a knife shows up in my house every day, in a dream. I'm even a little reluctant to wear a bat suit now. Once I meet her, I don't know what to say to her." Schiller never dreamed that the first psychological counseling question that Batman opened up to him was actually Bruce's teenage love troubles. As we all know, in the comics, Batman and Catwoman are true love. The screenwriters used a lot of ink to describe the love story of the two people. Indeed, a dark knight with a vengeance and a cunning and beautiful criminal. Even if the background of all this it is a dark Gotham City, and there will still be a large number of readers buying it. Schiller said, "It seems that Harvey should have enlightened you, but it doesn't seem to be of any use. Harvey is right, I knew she was a thief before I fell in love with her. I even met her when he robbed the jewelry store. I don't know how I would fall in love with a criminal, it's ridiculous." Schiller, what do you think made you Batman? Bruce pondered for a while and said, "A lot of things." Then what do you think made her become a thief? Bruce was silent. "So, you are sulking yourself here without knowing anything about a woman's past and family. Are you sure you really like him? Not just for a romantic one-night stand?" "I haven't even slept with her yet," Bruce said. "Do you want me to applaud your innocence?" Schiller said, and then his eyes fell to Bruce's waist, and he said, "She gave your kidney a knife before you went to bed, and I'm a little worried now. Your life is safe. You think I should talk to him?" Bruce said. Schiller sighed and said, "It's the thief that you like. If you don't talk to her, do you want to talk to me? Go and fall in love with whoever you like, understand?" Schiller said a little helplessly. "Otherwise, what do you think dating is about? Two people have been running around on the roof of Gotham for several days, and they don't even know who the other's parents are. If you don't sleep with her, don't fall in love with her. If you ask me, I will give you a knife." Bruce paused and said, "Okay, I'll go talk to her." The next day, Batman caught Catwoman again in an exhibition hall. Although he didn't know about Catwoman's past and family, he was quite sure about her habits. When Catwoman saw him, she scolded secretly, and immediately wanted to run away. But she didn't run away. Batman grabbed her cape again. Catwoman scolded, took a deep breath, turned her head and said, "Let go of me. You weirdo. Don't let me use a knife." Batman said, "Let's talk." "What do I have to talk about with you? Don't get in my way." 10 minutes later, the two came to the roof of the exhibition hall, and Catwoman waved her hands helplessly and said, okay, my little boy, what are you going to talk about? Tell me big truths. Your pile of truths. I'll be back soon." "No, I just want to hear your story," Batman said. Catwoman was a little surprised. She was silent for a while, glanced at the pair of pointed ears on top of Batman's head, and said, "It depends on your aesthetics in terms of dress, okay. I'm from the slums in the East, you know, the biggest and messiest. My mother was an alcoholic and my father was a drug addict, but I'm lucky I didn't get a drug addict. I grew up with a prostitute who was a retired. The acrobat taught me a lot. Of course she has a bad temper. I have been beaten a lot, but fortunately I learned something real. When she wanted to sell me to a stinking middle-aged man, I ran out. I was 12 years old. Afterwards, there was a nosy orphanage that insisted on letting me live there. I said okay, then I'll go. Later, someone there wanted to adopt me, but then I offended the administrator there. He thought he abused me and I stole his diamond necklace and ran away. I met a chief thief. We all call her Lucky Mama. She specially trains little girls like us to steal things for her. I have practiced acrobatics and I am good at it. She is her favorite child. But the good times didn't last long. She found the diamond necklace that I had been hiding on my body. You know, it was very valuable, enough for her to retire and quit. She asked me to hand it over, but I didn't want to do that, so I ran out again. Later I met a sister. Her name was Maggie. She was very nice to me, but her boyfriend always beat her and tried to kill her. When he was about to do it, I killed the man and was killed by wanted. I didn't want to implicate my sisters, so I just drifted away, but sometimes I made money and sent it back. That's it. It's a very ordinary story. It's not very exciting. I don't think your life experience is as exciting, right? Great hero. Batman seemed a little silent. He said, not good enough. Isn't it good enough? Catwoman shook her head, and she said, oh, I forgot, you are a young master who grew up in a wealthy area. Everyone in your place should go to school step by step, right? But not in our place. There aren't 1 or 2 students in a block. In fact, my mother loves me a lot, but she's a little bit under alcohol control. She spends more time with cats than with me. My parents don't have the ability to study for me, and my neighbors are all like this. It's good that one of my parents is sane, at least it won't starve to death. I've also heard that there are parents who have both. He was so drunk that the child climbed onto the stove and was burned to death. Of course, people like us have similar upbringing experiences. If you are lucky, like me, learning a craft, the best way out is to work for gangsters. If you can become a dealer in a casino, that's really decent. It's an incredible job. Maggie's boyfriend is a casino thug, and he's so popular that several escorts there stick to him. Actually, Lucky Mom is also nice to me. She sometimes acts like a real mom. Whenever I steal a lot of jewelry for her, she compliments me and even gives me candy. Of course, she treats those who steal children who don't come here or either beating or scolding, but in my opinion, they are just young, and it's almost the same after a few years of good practice. Catwoman spoke intermittently in a relaxed and lively tone, and the life she described was quite interesting. For example, when she was practicing acrobatics, she fell off the eaves for the first time and hit a person. As a result, the unlucky alcoholic just took $12 from someone before it fell into Catwoman's hands. She took the money. The money went to buy food for my mother's cat. Yu reading www.uakonchu.com also got a kiss from her mother. Batman has been silent. He listened quietly. Catwoman stopped talking. She looked at Batman and said, okay, I know this story disappoints you. I have nothing rich and wonderful college life, and I don't know what your job search goals are. We are completely 2 worlds. You rich people should have no interest in this kind of slum life. After all, it sounds dirty and messy. Batman said in a low voice, no, this is the most wonderful story I have ever heard. Catwoman raised her eyebrows and said, your mouth is so sweet. I'm a little embarrassed for your praise, but I'm actually very happy, because no one is willing to listen to me talking about these things. Maggie's health is not very good, she can't go out. When we chat, she prefers to listen to my story of traveling through the rich area, and listening to me tell her about the dresses and necklaces that rich ladies wear. Batman asked, do you like jewelry that much? I knew you were going to ask this question. Catwoman said with a wink. In the beginning, I didn't want to be beaten just because these jewels could get a better deal at Lucky Mom. But later, when Lucky Mother asked me for the diamond necklace, I realized that I actually liked their original luster, not how much they could sell for. When I thought that Lucky Mother would sell these treasures for money, I am heartbroken. That mesmerizing sheen, especially in the light of the light, that's the most beautiful thing in this world. My lifelong dream is to have a huge castle filled with all these beautiful gems. Catwoman. His tone was getting lighter and lighter, as if he was about to pop out a happy bubble. When Schiller saw that Bruce's dark and unsatisfactory look was written on his face, he knew that the conversation with Catwoman might not be smooth. "Aren't you guys going to fight again?" Bruce said. "Worse than that." "Well, which ward is she in now?" Schiller asked. "I mean, Gotham is worse than I thought. There's a bunch of bad guys here that you can't blame, because in this environment, they've done enough," Bruce said. "I think you should now realize that being Batman is not that simple, right?" Schiller said. "Indeed," Bruce said, "I thought I had a hard armor, a bulletproof helmet, a sharp bat dart, and a gun and bullets. What gangster can't deal with these things?" "Guns are really useful," Schiller said. "At least you can guarantee that someone will listen to what you say." "I couldn't say, 'You're wrong,' to Selina," and Bruce covered his eyes and said, "Actually, she's done well enough." Quote, "Jonathan probably doesn't think so. If I tell you now that Jonathan actually grew up in such an environment, and the crime he committed was actually because no one taught him, what would you think?" Bruce opened his mouth. He realized that he originally thought he was just, but later he knew that nothing was absolutely just, but he felt that he was at least fair, but now he found that he didn't seem to be fair enough. He has to admit that he is partial to Selina. Many of the gangsters he punished are just like Catwoman Selina, but they are not as lucky. Their family and past are a mess. They go to work for gangsters, not because of how vicious they are born bad, they just eat. Breaking out of the shackles of the native class is much harder than expected, especially in Gotham. This fact made Bruce feel a little desperate. He finally understood why Schiller said he didn't understand Gotham. Because anyone who wants to save Gotham completely doesn't understand Gotham. Everyone here is a bad person, but there is not a single bad person here. You can't find a person who should be rescued among this group of walking corpses, nor can you find a person who was born to be destroyed. There is no culprit here, everyone here is the culprit. This hero's upgrade path is very different from what Bruce thinks. He feels that he only needs to catch enough criminals, ask for information from them, and then follow the clues to find the few cancers that have been affecting Gotham, bring them to justice at the end, and Gotham just keeps getting better. But now he finds that this is a bottomless pit. When he catches one batch of cancers, there will be another batch. When he punishes one culprit, there will always be another. No one can stand this kind of consumption. It doesn't refer to wealth or health. Harvey believes that only those who reach the finish line win, but Batman, he doesn't even have a finish line. Only now does Bruce realize that his struggle with Gotham will definitely use up his life. Then he realized that wealth, equipment and fighting skills really can't make him a real Batman, because his biggest enemy is not a criminal, but abandonment. The biggest problem he faces is not how cunning his opponent is, but whether he is firm enough. Is he firm enough to spend his whole life with a city that cannot be saved, to spend endlessly? It's as if ordinary people spend their entire lives trying to make the sun come out from the west. Batman is standing on the roof of Gotham Central building. The wind is strong here, whistling past his ears. Under his feet, there are countless mediocre villains, like a group of nesting ants. From here it can be clearly seen. See everything in Gotham. Batman thought there was no order in Gotham, there was only chaos, but now he found that there is not only order here, but it is stronger than any other place. If there is only chaos, then he can rebuild order, but now, he can even break Gotham. This original order cannot be achieved. After a while, Batman heard footsteps behind him, and Catwoman walked over with her hands behind her back. Seeing Batman turn around, she smiled, took out a gem from behind, handed it to Batman with a smile, and said, "I picked a very beautiful little treasure from my collection. Of course, I am reluctant to give the biggest, I'll give you that one, but I think this one is pretty good too." Before Bruce could speak, Catwoman said, "I chatted with Maggie yesterday, and she said I should apologize to you, because no matter what, I shouldn't scratch you with a dagger. I've never apologized to anyone, and if they want to beat me, I'll beat them back. But I think you've been very kind to me, and you went for a ride with me up high buildings, and I stabbed you, which seems to be true wrong." She blinked her beautiful big eyes, those brown eyes gleaming in the Gotham-like darkness, and said, "I can tell that you are very upset. I hope this gem can make you feel better." Batman glanced down at the gem in his hand. It was a triangular ruby, a bit like his ear. For the first time, He felt that this was not a mineral that was meaningless to humans except for being beautiful. Batman asked, "Do you want to hear my story?" On the other side, Schiller was holding the phone and said, he was released on medical parole. How did he pass the approval? Although I don't want to blame you, the Gotham Police Department is a little too playful. He thought about it. Well, the Gotham Police Department really has no lower limit to break through. Then he said to Gordon on the other end, I hope he can stay in the hospital well and don't come back to make trouble. You know, I'm different from Batman. Gordon hung up the phone and sighed. He knew it wasn't that simple. Despite all his efforts, Jonathan was finally admitted to the lunatic asylum. Victor disappeared and Rantalos died. However, the old president of Gotham University did not go to prison in the name of medical parole. He had been in Gotham for so many years, and he still had some connections, but he finally succeeded. Schiller has never been afraid to think of a Gotham citizen in the worst possible light. He knew that the old principal wouldn't give up so easily. Sure enough, the next day, when Schiller was about to get off work, a girl rushed into her office in a panic. This is the girl who complained to the school when Christine disappeared. She is Christine, Ting's good friend. Christine disappeared again, Schiller asked. It's worse than that, the girl said anxiously. Since then, Christine gave me a security number, and she told me that as long as this number hits my mobile phone, it means that she may be dangerous. Schiller quickened his packing speed and said, when did it happen? Just 3 minutes ago. The phone was on, but there was no sound over there. Schiller reassured the girl, and then called Bruce. He said, bad news, Christine has an accident again. I wonder if Gordon told you. The old principal didn't go to jail in the name of medical parole. If he to get revenge, it must be the first to get revenge on the person who testified against him. Bruce immediately returned to Wayne Manor and put on all Batman's equipment. He persuaded Christine to testify against the principal, so he must save the girl. It's a pity that the old principal has learned to be smart this time. He didn't use any unprofessional gangsters, but hired professional kidnappers. They did not leave any traces. It seems that the old principal just wanted revenge, not use her to threaten others. But this just shows that Christine is likely to be in an extremely dangerous environment. After a while, Batman received a call from Schiller. Schiller said, the street where the Red Crow gang used to be in the East District, the drug den you destroyed. Before Bruce could ask why, Schiller hung up the phone, and Batman ran all the way, racing fast in the darkness of Gotham. But now he doesn't have the Batmobile. The ordinary sports car is not fast enough. It will take a while to get from Wayne Manor to the East End, and Christine may be hurt at any time, although he doesn't like Christine, but I don't want to see an innocent person killed tragically. Batman slammed the steering wheel hard, and he deeply felt that he must have a better means of transportation. Suddenly, an unexpected number called, and Catwoman's voice rang over there, and she said, hey, I seem to see your little girlfriend who is waiting for you on the street every day. What's going on? What are they doing? Going to Maple Street. It's dangerous there. She was kidnapped. Find a way to save her. No, I mean, can you keep an eye on them? Look at them from a distance and call me. Forget it. No, don't follow. Go up and tell me where they went. You sound like you need help, Catwoman said. Batman seemed a little impatient. He said, it's none of your business. Just don't go out and cause me trouble tonight. After he finished speaking, he hung up the phone and drove all the way to Maple Leaf Street. After a while, Batman appeared at the end of Maple Avenue, which was indeed the former Red Raven's gang. He destroyed a poppy den here. Batman has a good memory. He walked along the right side of the street. Go straight ahead, then turn 2 alleys. As soon as he reached the end of the alley, he heard fierce fighting and gunshots coming from it. Batman quickly found the back door and plucked the lock. When he entered, first a group of scumbags were lying in disorder. Outside, these people were screaming on the ground, as if they were hit by a joint technique. Passing through the gatehouse and entering the living room, 7 or 8 masked kidnappers could be seen lying on the ground. A whip almost hit Batman with the whistling sound of the wind. Catwoman turned around and said, thank God, this little girl is fine. Batman turned his gaze to Christine on the sofa. Her clothes were a little messy. If Catwoman hadn't arrived in time, something would have happened. Then, Catwoman sniffed, frowned and said, no, why do I smell oil? Your car is leaking. No, it's bad. It's probably a Molotov cocktail. Hurry up and get out of here. Before she could finish speaking, the glass at the main entrance was shattered, and countless Molotov cocktails wrapped in cloth were thrown in. The raging flames burst into flames. In this abandoned den, there are quite a few fabric sofas, curtains and other combustibles. After a while, the fire became very fierce. Bruce was holding Christine in a coma. As soon as they walked to the back door, they found that the back door that had been pried open had been blocked by heavy objects from the outside. Obviously, this was a premeditated trap. Batman's clothes are fireproof, but if they continued to burn like this, Christine and Catwoman are in danger, and the fireproof clothes does not mean that he is resistant to choking. The fire is getting bigger and bigger, and the thick black smoke makes the whole house almost nothing. Can't see clearly, several people are coughing. Suddenly, there was a crisp, dang bang, sound from the right side, and it seemed that something fell. Catwoman responded quickly, and the whip went straight, but when she dragged it back, it turned out to be a fire extinguisher. Regardless of where the fire extinguisher came from, Catwoman shook it vigorously, and Batman said, "Go from where they threw the Molotov cocktail, there should be a vacuum there." Batman led the way with a fire extinguisher, and Catwoman supported Christine in the back. Sure enough, the person who threw the flask used a lot of strength to make the flask fall in the center of the hall, not in front of the door. There was nothing flammable except for a small carpet in front of the door. Batman took a fire extinguisher to put out the flames that burned over. The two rushed forward all the way. Going to the door, Batman first broke the door lock with a gun, and then began to hit the iron door with all his strength. The man who threw the Molotov cocktail was obviously in a hurry. The front door was not blocked as badly as the back door. Batman hit the front door a few times and opened a gap. But this also means that the air has begun to circulate, the fire has become bigger, Catwoman has almost fainted from choking, and Batman can obviously feel his hand on his shoulder begin to slide down. Once he loses consciousness, she and Christine must die. Batman used all his strength, and finally hit hard, bang. The door was opened, and the three escaped. Catwoman was breathing heavily. At this time, both Batman and Catwoman were covered in smoke. Smoky traces. After sending Christine back, Batman asked Catwoman, who was sitting in the co-pilot while driving, "Why did you rush in to save Christine? That's dangerous, isn't it?" Catwoman was still excitedly looking at the interior of the luxury car. Apparently she had never been in such an expensive car before. She cleared her throat and eased her excitement, and after a while, she said, "Actually, I just thought of a lot of reasons for you to praise me, such as I plan to learn from you to be a good person, such as she's a righteous heroine in her bones, or I can't stand those kidnappers hurting innocent people." Then Catwoman looked at him, and when he was watched by those brown eyes, Batman felt his heart beating fast again. "You don't want me to do bad things, but I really like those gems so much, so I can do bad things once and do good things again, won't it work?" "Well, actually, I just wanted to make you happy." Catwoman shrugged. "I know, I can't be a big hero, I just like to steal things. This is a habit I developed since I was a child, and I don't know any big truths. Maybe that one is always there. The girl waiting for you on the street is much better than me. After all, she is highly educated, beautiful and charming, and she is very innocent and ignorant, and she has done nothing bad. But that's how I am. I never think about those things, I just do what I want to do. Whether you think of me as a criminal or a hopelessly bad person, I am who I am. This is who I am, a cat." Batman slightly loosened his grip on the steering wheel. He didn't know if this was the answer he wanted. But he knew that the romance, liveliness and sincerity in Catwoman were not the fundamental reason why he fell in love with her. A bat will fall in love with a cat, he is just envious of her freedom, those freedoms he will never get as a Dark Knight. He has made up his mind to fight to the end with this hopeless city. Looking at the luxury car slowly stopping at the intersection, Schiller on the roof said to the symbiote in his head, "No, we can't go down. The next thing is not something children should watch." The symbiote let out a string of dissatisfied grunts. "Yes, I know you did a great job just now. You brought a fire extinguisher from the cafe across the street and threw it in. It was very accurate. But what's in the car is just the meaningless reproduction process of human beings. Your symbiote doesn't need this process, you just need to drop the scum." The symbiote fell silent, and Schiller didn't know if he understood. Schiller looked away from the luxury car and looked at the dimly lit night of Gotham. Maybe this is a hopeless city, maybe Batman is a normal person who feels hopeless and confused, he thought. But Batman is not alone, and he will never be alone. In a small bar on the edge of the wealthy southern part of Gotham City, Schiller squeezed a bit of lemon juice into the gin, and he took the glass and said to Gordon, "Congratulations, detective, now at least you can do what you want." Bruce, who was across from the round table, also raised his glass, and after Harvey lifted the glass, he said, "It's time to celebrate, you are the most honest policeman I've ever seen." The four touched the glasses. Gordon took a sip of wine. His face was a little red. He didn't know whether it was due to excitement or the effect of alcohol. He said, "The more this is, the more I know that I'm still too far away." "It's always good to have progress," Bruce said. Schiller smiled. He covered his mouth with a glass of wine, and said, "Really? It seems that our recent innocent boy has made great progress." Bruce put down his glass, and he said, "I remember you once said, Professor, that you don't have any advice on my personal love life. But I also reminded you that it's better to be careful with your kidneys. I mean to protect your kidneys, but it's not just that you don't let it get knifed. The scenery of Trick Street is really good, and the neon lights there are all over the East Coast, very famous." Gordon's eyes moved back and forth between the two of them, then he raised his eyebrows and said, "What are you playing with?" "It's nothing, but I advise you not to mind your own business in the future. Some people are very confident in their kidney function." Gordon understood this. He said, "It seems that Bruce's love life has been very rich recently." Schiller put down the glass and said with a smile, "On the contrary." Harvey knew something. He touched Bruce with his arm and said, "It seems that you and the girl you mentioned are progressing very quickly, how is it? You have already established a relationship." Gordon immediately pricked up his ears. Bruce touched his temple, looked at the eyes of the three who were watching the fun and said, "Don't be like this, don't be like this, what does it matter? That's my private business. The theme of our party today is to celebrate Gordon's promotion. I don't think the job of the Gotham Police Department's team leader is as worthy of celebration as our richest man in the world has a new girlfriend," Gordon said. "That's a bit of an exaggeration. After all, the world's richest man has too many girlfriends," Schiller said. "But the team leader of the police station is just like ordinary police, and it's useless." Gordon laughed at himself. Bruce, frustrated by them, said, "Well, I admit, yes, I fell in love with a girl. No, not that kind, not because of her pretty face and body. Oh, of course she pretty and in great shape, but not." Gordon and Harvey both look like you don't need to explain. Harvey also said, "At your age, I like any girl, not because of their appearance, but I know now that this is a fart. Men all over the world are farting when they say this." Gordon tugged on his tie and said, "Is it possible that there is a girl who really made Bruce move? Then I really want to see how holy he is." Bruce said, "She's not really special, she's just a girl from the slums. Like all ordinary girls, she likes shiny gems and jewelry, and her dream is to have a castle full of gems." "Do you prefer German or French castles?" Schiller asked. "I think Neuschwanstein Castle is pretty good. How about buying it?" Bruce flicked his glass reluctantly and said, "I'm not soaking her. I'm serious, don't look at me like that. I admit that I used to be a little, well, not a little, but I really intend to marry her." "You're not facing her now, you don't have to say these pretty words." Schiller quickly interrupted Bruce, "Can anyone say this? But it doesn't really matter. Anyway, Batman is the protagonist, so it shouldn't be a big problem for the protagonist to say this." Bruce took a sip of wine, and he seemed a little excited. He said, "We have indeed established a relationship, and we have been dating for several nights in a row. She gave me a very beautiful gem. What about you? Didn't you give her anything?" Harvey asked. Bruce said, "I'm thinking." "That's a bit rude," Harvey said. "Don't you look down on her ghetto origin. With all due respect, not everyone is as lucky as you are, and I don't think class can stop love, at least for you." "Of course I don't think so. The problem is, if you don't hurry up and give her a gift that proves your heart, then she might think so," Schiller said. "Any slum girl who falls in love with the world's richest man will probably not be very confident." "Okay," Bruce said, "what do you think I should get her?" "I can't think of it for a long time. Harvey doesn't know Catwoman's true face, because he doesn't know that Bruce is Batman, let alone the story between them. But Schiller was clear about this. Schiller said, "How about a necklace of pearls?" Bruce clenched his hand on the wine glass. He took a sip and said, "I have to admit, I don't like pearl necklaces very much, but if she likes it, I will definitely give her the best one." After the party, Schiller went back to his apartment to clean up, except for the smell of alcohol. It is not without reason for Schiller to shuttle between DC and Marvel. After coming to DC, on the one hand, he wanted to wait for Marvel's plot to go away by himself, and on the other hand, he wanted to finish the matter on time. He is a fairly prudent person. He hopes that everything will have a beginning and an end. Although it was a little surprising that the old principal didn't go to prison, his original purpose of coming back was to clean up the end of the last Jonathan case. The old principal has now become Batman's target. Schiller does not intend to intervene for the time being, but there is still one person, the missing Chief Victor. Schiller knew that it was Sal Maroni who had kidnapped him. Even so, Maroni might not have killed him. A former police chief could come up with a lot of useful information, Maroni said. With such a huge loss, he won't let Victor die so easily unless he can get his money back. But Schiller had to kill Victor. In the early days of Jonathan's case, his ability was not enough. When stealing the fear gas, he only used the simplest method, that is, burglary, but at that time he couldn't do it completely without traces, although he removed 99% of the traces, but he still wants to kill the remaining 1% of the possibility of being discovered. In order to reverse the case for Jonathan, Victor entered the evidence room more than once. This old policeman was the only person who could expose Schiller's theft of fear gas. You know, after Jonathan entered the lunatic asylum, the most traditional version of the fear gas concentrate was out of print, but due to Maroni's huge loss, many people in the gang are eyeing this weapon. Once someone reveals who it is, steal the fear gas, and the gang will swarm like sharks that smell meat. Schiller had planned to visit Maroni, but before that, an unexpected person approached him. Schiller followed a man in black into the car, and a man in a suit sitting in front said, "Professor Schiller, you don't have to be afraid. The Godfather asked you to come over just because he needs your help." The extended luxury car quickly arrived at a manor not far from the Southern District. Schiller walked in with the guide. The decoration of the manor was very old-fashioned. After he entered, he went up to the third floor, and the guide knocked on the door. A deep voice came from inside, "Please come in." Schiller walked in, and he saw a tall man, or an old man, with silver gray hair, dressed in a decent suit, with a bow tie, and a red poppy pin to his breast pocket. An air of indifference. He groped for the ring on his hand and said to Schiller, "Professor Rodriguez, I take the liberty to disturb you. I asked you to come because I need your help. I am honored to serve you." Under the Falco cabinet, Schiller walked over and was separated by a table distance from Falcone. Behind him was a floor-to-ceiling window, with two bodyguards in black standing on either side. www.mtlnovel.com. Falcone didn't say anything. "What?" He nodded, and then said directly, out of his own requirements, "I have a son, he is not young this year, my family and business need him to inherit, I hope to hire you as his tutor." Quote. Without waiting for Schiller to ask a question, Falcone said, "His former tutor was shot 3 times in the chest and he didn't come back. I heard people say that you can even get Bruce Wayne to turn in his homework on time. Should be a good teacher candidate. Of course, I'm not threatening you. I know you caused some trouble in the metropolis. Some people found it here by the smell, but they should all be in the gutter by now. This is my sincerity." How? Schiller looked at Falcone, who was more like the gang leader who was portrayed by DC Comics in the early days. Falcone was inspired by Corleone in The Godfather, the character created by Marlon Brando. Now it seems that the old man is indeed more like the godfather of the family ruling Gotham's huge gangster than the image of Falcone wearing a jacket and eccentric sunglasses in movies and TV shows. "Yes, but I have one more request. The former police chief is missing," Schiller said. "You want to find him?" "No, I want to kill him." Falcone sat down. He took a cigar that was handed to him by the person next to him, took a puff, exhaled the smoke, and said slowly, "Victor. I know him, a little clever old liar, you have a relationship with him." "What hatred?" "I think, in Gotham, you don't have to have hatred to kill someone." Falcone smiled with a cigar, and he said, "It seems that you will indeed be a good teacher." Quote dot dot dot. Thrall, like his partner, is a little clever. I remember the first time I met him, he was a young boy who had just come to Gotham, with a few people at the dock to blackmail the owner of the cargo ship. It didn't take long. He was spotted by Lauren in the red light district, the redhead who led him around the block and quickly bought his first bar, which was more than 20 years ago. Sitting in a chair, smoking a cigar, Falcone recalled, Thrall won't let that police chief go, even if he's going to take some information out of his mouth, he'll die in the end, he said. You can change the conditions, such as what else do you want to kill, or what trouble do you want to solve? My troubles come from the metropolis, so I won't bother the Godfather. Falcone turned his eyes slightly, glanced at him and said, the guys I helped you solve seem to have a lot of backgrounds. Who did you get into? Schiller raised his eyes and said, Your Excellency Godfather, I think I may be your son's longest-lived tutor. Falconer tapped the end of his cigar on the table and said, You work for me, of course I won't let trouble find you, but you've been involved in those weird things yourself, and now you're hiding here. Aren't you afraid that I will drag the Falcone family into the water? Falcone turned the chair back and said, When did the Falcone family come ashore? From the day I came to Gotham, I knew that we are all wrecks in a sunken ship, and we will never even think about going ashore. Then he sighed slightly again. But my son thinks differently from me. Little Falcone, also known as Evans Falcone, is different from the old Godfather. He is full of enthusiasm and feels that he can rectify the order of Gotham by himself. That's right, although he is the heir of the future gangster family, he really wants to reorganize the Gotham order, but this order is based on violence, not really creating a utopia. To be honest, his thoughts may even be more normal than Batman. Absolute violence brings absolute authority, and absolute authority controls everyone. The question is whether little Falcone has this ability. After a while, the housekeeper stood outside the door and knocked on the door. Evans stood behind him. As soon as he walked in and saw Schiller, he was obviously stunned, and then turned back and whispered to the housekeeper, You remember that I recently did you mention forgetting to bring homework, or forgetting to turn in homework? The housekeeper shook his head. Evans was obviously relieved. Schiller stood up and said, Evans. You know each other? Falcone asked. Father, this is my university professor. I remember I mentioned to you that I want to do my psychology homework. Before Falcone could say anything, Evans said, Sorry, Professor, if there is something wrong with my recent assignment, it may be that I have been busy and neglected recently. If you are not satisfied, then I can rewrite it immediately. Then he moved his lips, turned to Falcone and said, Father, things in the East Block recently made me a little busy, maybe I neglected my studies. I'm really sorry that Professor Schiller came to visit you. Schiller understood that he had misunderstood and thought he was visiting his home, but in fact Evans was afraid of death now. He has long heard of Schiller's splendid and murderous name, where he goes, the serial killer stamp collector, who scolded Bruce Wayne in class for not turning in his homework, and gave him a notice of expulsion. Schiller, the homework madman, is well known throughout Gotham University. No professor has ever asked students to hand in homework so strictly. No matter who it is, as long as he dares not to hand in homework, he will definitely gain a lot in his class. Disgraceful cynicism, even if you're Bruce Wayne, president of Gotham University's Board of Trustees. But Evans never imagined that he would go to the godfather of the biggest gangster family in Gotham, chasing after him for homework. Evans lamented in his heart, Is this professor crazy? No wonder he scolded Bruce Wayne like a reserving dog, and even the new headmaster, Selden, walked around him. As the heir of the gangster family, Evans didn't believe in those messy rumors at first, but he does believe it now. If it wasn't for some mental problems, who would come to visit the Godfather? It's no wonder that Schiller cares so much about homework. His mentality has not changed from the teaching style of his previous life. You must know that many students can't memorize the tomes of psychology, and often can't get one in the final exam. With very high grades, if you want to pass at this time, you can only rely on your average score to pull up, but if you don't even write homework and don't have your normal score, the pass rate will definitely be terrifyingly low. If the pass rate is too low, his evaluation will definitely be affected. Although Gotham University has no reliable professor evaluation plan at all, and no one cares about students passing or failing, Schiller has been used to it in his previous life, and he feels that he's still without the 3 successes. Gotham University students who have been educated happily since childhood have already broken their defenses. If they were thrown into the university where Schiller taught in their previous life, they would be killed by just a small class paper. You must know that those students wrote 20,000 small papers and completed large papers according to the standard of publishing books. That's why he couldn't understand that a small paper requiring less than 3,000 words could not be written enough. Moreover, the number of words in an English paper should be less than that of a Chinese paper, and a standard paper of 3,000 words would not be enough. It's only 2,000 words, so why can't they be delivered? So after Schiller used all kinds of methods to chase homework, 3/4 of the students in his class were finally able to turn in their homework, including Evans. Of course, even he was the better one. Basically every article is handed in, the number of words in each article is enough, and the content is not bad, and there are 2 or 3 times that have won the first place. Schiller thinks that such a good student should be praised. They are also freshmen. Look at the ignorant Bruce. The 2,000-word thesis, turning words can take up 1/3, meaningless. The decoration and description can take up 1/3 of the rest, and the rest except the is a, and the dashes of others are only 2 characters away. He can write a long line. In this way, he is too embarrassed to let Schiller take him. Falcone frowned slightly and said, "In that case, how is Evans doing in school? Is there anything wrong with his homework? What about his test scores?" Evans took a deep breath, and Schiller said, "Actually, very good. I heard Anna, who teaches advanced mathematics, also talked to me. Evans's science is quite good, at least I am willing to give him a postgraduate place. He's quite gifted in psychology." Evans breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing his son behave like this, Falcone said directly, "Professor Schiller will be your tutor in the future." Evans was shocked and his back was cold, but he didn't dare to question his father's decision. He could only say, "Okay, father." Falcone held the 2 armrests of the chair, stood up from the chair, and said, "Looks like I have to deal with you, those troubles you brought from the metropolis." Schiller shook his head and said, "This is a lot of trouble. I don't think the price I paid is worth it." Falcone said, "It's not enough to be my son's governess, but if you become a friend of the Falcone family, we'll take care of everything for our friends. Behind Metropolis there is a huge dark vortex that no one can imagine. www.mtlnovel.com. I escaped from there, but lost a lot of things. There is no need for Gotham people to participate in Metropolis, no." Falcone shook his head, took another puff of his cigar, and said, "You don't know me well enough, sir. 40 years ago, when I came to Gotham alone, no one had ever heard of Falcone. The name of Nay, 30 years ago, I became the owner of 3 streets, and there was no Falcone family at that time. I don't want to brag about my achievements, but I ruled Gotham for 40 years, ruled the city that was once called Hell." Falcone pressed the end of his cigar against the table, smoke rising from his fingers, and he said, "So you just have to say, yes, and all the troubles you've had will be goodbye." Schiller looked at him. Falcone's expression was calmer than Schiller had imagined. Schiller thought, this Falcone is obviously not the little villain who was a novice Batman in the comics. He is the worthy godfather of Gotham and the uncrowned king of Gotham City. When there is no Batman, Gotham City has never been peaceful. The godfather has ruled here for 40 years. Such a person cannot be as stupid and short-sighted as described in the comics. Finally, Schiller stepped forward, he kissed Falcone's right hand, and said, "God bless Gotham, Godfather." Schiller turned the stress of the last word in his mouth, and Falcone heard the subtle difference, but he didn't mind. No matter how brilliant he was in the past 40 years, the Godfather is really old, and the heir to the Falcone family is far from mature. Falcone thought, perhaps, Gotham's kingless era is coming. The next day, Schiller finished his class and collected his homework on time as usual, but today he found that the class had 32 homework assignments, which were handed in neatly, and from the perspective of thickness, it seemed that they had written enough words. He is a little strange. Usually, although he rushes homework very hard, there are always 1 or 2 people who do not submit it. Among the many people who have submitted it, there are also many people who are fooled. Stack up blank paper, or simply copy some articles and hand them in. But this time, he stood on the podium, flipped through it roughly, and found that everyone actually wrote the papers seriously, although some of them were not very good. at first glance, they had never written a paper, but at least I tried my best to focus on the topic, although the wording was like a desperate illiterate, but at least I tried my best not to stray from the topic. The students didn't dare to let out the air when they saw him flipping through the homework. In the past, when this time came, the get out of class was about to end. The students were all packing up, but now no one is moving, and they all stay in their seats honestly, waiting for Schiller to speak. The reason for this is very simple. Just last night, the whole class knew that Schiller went directly to Falcone, the underground king of Gotham, in order to chase after Evans for homework. In the era of no Batman, let's call this era the pre-Batman era. In this era, Falcone and the 12 gangster families under his rule have the greatest voice in Gotham. How powerful are these gangster families? The leader of the Eastern District, Sal Maroni, is just a running dog of the Lauren family, and the Lauren family ranks last among the 12 gangster families. The first is the Falcone family, and the old godfather Falcone has the right to speak to the 12 families. In this day and age, you don't have to know who the mayor of Gotham is, or even Bruce Wayne, but you have to know the last names of Fennecle and a dozen other gangster families, or you can't live in Gotham at all. Ever since I knew that Schiller had followed up with Gotham's Godfather, all the students' workup process last night was quite thrilling. Schiller was very happy, so he said, "The situation of this assignment looks very optimistic. It seems that everyone has finished writing it more seriously, and then after I have marked these assignments, I will add extra to everyone. If you don't want to go to graduate school, you can come to my office to talk about recommendation letters." As a result, the classroom suddenly burst into warm applause, and I don't know if it was for Schiller's reward, or for the rest of their lives. And all of this was seen by the headmaster Selden. As for Selden, if it sounds good, it is called persistence, and if it sounds bad, it is a shaft. He will definitely try to mess with whoever he is targeting. Although Schiller's tough attitude makes him unable to strike immediately, he has always looking for opportunities. The principal can mobilize the surveillance cameras in all Gotham classrooms and observe the teachers' lectures. This function has become the best way for Selden to monitor Schiller. In the next few days, in Schiller's class, all the students were as quiet as chickens, and Evans automatically assumed the position of the monitor, collecting homework, handing in homework, handing out homework every day, organizing classroom discipline, and the whole teaching situation was in order. Orderly, no one can pick out what's wrong. This gave Selden an illusion. Originally, when he was working in the Academic Affairs Office of Princeton, most of the students were basically at this level. After coming to Gotham University, he was too busy to establish himself and did not take the initiative to understand the level of the students. In his opinion, homework is a student's vocation. Although Gotham University is not ranked as Princeton, it seems that the quality of the students is not too bad. At least in Schiller's class. Selden only focused on observing Schiller's class, and in Schiller's class, all the students were quiet and completed their learning tasks well, which made Schiller's teaching arrangements go smoothly. Then Selden had another idea. As we all know, the campus alcohol prohibition he implemented was stuck in a position where he couldn't go down. At present, most of the people who are willing to follow this plan have also handed over their alcohol, but those who are unwilling are all diehards. These people would rather resist with guns than let the school interfere with their right to drink. Students can resist with guns, but Selden, the principal, can't force students not to drink with guns. He is not a native of Gotham, and his thinking is still in a civilized society, so this plan is stuck in a quite embarrassing position. There is no way to continue. When they found out that they didn't eat the fine drink, Selden wanted to come to toast again. Selden, who was also a professor before taking on administrative work, graduated from Oxford University with a degree in modern literature and has taught at both the University of California and the Metropolitan University. Selden felt that to control Gotham University, he had to get along with the students, and it was a good route to be welcomed by everyone like Harvey. So he wanted to teach a class himself. As it happens, Gotham University has almost no literature department. There is only one teacher who teaches basic courses. Literature and philosophy majors have not recruited students for many years. After all, this place has no soil for literature and philosophy. Reinvigorate the literature department and take the lead in reviving the literature major. If he can recruit a group of liberal arts students taught by himself, then he will have his own direct line in this school. This is what Selden planned. And it seems that Schiller's class is very comfortable, and the teaching goals are implemented well. In general, the weather is sunny, the rain has stopped, and Selden thinks he can do it again. Although he is a university professor, the process of class is not much different from teaching elementary school. Selden is like a cloud player watching video, watching Schiller in class from the monitoring side, and he feels relaxed. The process of Schiller's class is just to walk into the class, wait for the students to sit down, then take out the textbook and start the lecture. There will be 1 or 2 discussion sessions in the middle. After the discussion, either Schiller asks questions, or the group sends people to speak and speak. After that, Schiller conducted a round of summaries, and then talked about other content. The homework was collected when the get out of class was about to end. At the beginning of the next class, there would be a part of commenting on the homework. The 20th century university classroom is like this. There are no fancy slides. Most teachers follow the script. This is especially true for subjects such as psychology that require a lot of memorization. If you don't explain the book thoroughly, then don't think about anything. Learn to understand. This process is really not difficult to watch in the video of the class. If the students cooperate, they can even finish the teaching goal in advance, and when it is about to end, they can chat for a while. After the students became very obedient, Schiller was also willing to chat with them about the crazy murderers he had seen. Although Schiller could not remember many details because of amnesia, this legendary experience still made this man. Helping the Harry boys to listen with great interest, they found that this particularly strict professor did have his specialties. When announcing the establishment of the Faculty of Letters, Selden fired the teacher who taught the basics of the literature course, and then went into battle and started teaching on his own. Just like most cloud players of game videos, when watching the video, I feel that I can play on myself, and point crazily from the perspective of God, but when I actually enter the game, I am basically killed and lost, and I quit and delete the game. Refunds in one go. Selden was no exception. After he actually started the class, he found that Schiller's class was completely an illusion. There was no obedient student here. The basic literature course and the basic psychology course were somewhat similar, that is, they required a lot of recitation and writing paper. The first time I handed in my homework, the entire class had dozens of homework assignments, but only 2 were handed in, and one of them only had half the number of words written. Selden showed his tough politician style and denounced this behavior of not handing in homework in class, so when he turned in the homework for the second time, he didn't turn in one. For example, in science courses such as mathematics and physics, some people are naturally more interested. Reading www. Uakanshu. Com's tedious basic literature course, no Gotham University students will listen to the class well. The students do everything in class. Sleeping is considered a good hobby, such as eating, chatting loudly, squeezing gamepads, and even flying leaves in public. No matter how Selden shouted, no one paid him any attention. Even if he slammed out of the door in anger, it was just that the class turned into the same chaotic self-study. Selden also doesn't know Gotham. If he does, he will know that the students are good enough, and the quality of people who can go to college in this city is really high enough. In this city, there are no threats to classmates with guns, no physical bombing of schools, and no kidnapping of teachers and professors. The students of Gotham can already be called the pace-setters of civilization in this city. But Selden was still almost mad at them. Especially when a lot of students knew that the prohibition was made by Selden, so they started to protest in Selden's class. Someone took a whole case of champagne, uncorked it in the front row, and yelled at Selden. Spray, doused him with alcohol, and even organized a drinking party in class. Selden shouted about deducting credits and expelling them. The gang didn't care. Selden expelled 2 students, and the rest of the students were even more crazy, and it turned out that one dark night, Selden was walking around the school, was smashed by 2 wine bottles thrown out by someone unknown in the grass, and was admitted to the hospital. He couldn't understand why the quail-like students in Schiller's class turned into crazy extremists when they arrived. Maybe it's just that he hasn't heard Schiller say a word. Here, only criminals can deal with criminals. On the first day Schiller returned to Marvel, New York, Peter came to the clinic dejected, with a collapsed belt hanging from his arm. Schiller looked him up and down and said, "Your trip to the West doesn't look like it." "How well?" Peter sighed, sat down opposite Schiller, put his school bag on his lap, and accidentally touched the injured arm. He yelled, "Ah!" then sighed again and said, "Apart from everything else, I'm probably not really fit to be a superhero." What's wrong? Have you met a difficult opponent? The opponent is actually not difficult to deal with at all, but... Next, in Peter's description, Schiller hears about his ironic trip to the West with Captain America. Steve is a veteran with rich experience, but likewise, as Captain America, the team members he was assigned to in the past are also elite soldiers who have been tempered for a long time. Even recruits are not lacking in various combat skills, just lacks some practical experience. But Peter the Spider, he is a blank piece of paper now. He still relies on rogue punches for fights, and his defense basically depends on his physical fitness, not to mention his tactical skills. In order to exercise the little spider, Steve deliberately did not let S.H.I.E.L.D. arrange the itinerary, but set off with Peter himself. The first trouble they encountered on this road trip was Peter's insatiable appetite. Peter's spider mutated growth period hasn't passed yet. He needs to eat a lot of food every day. Even if Steve is rich, anyone who has watched some road movies knows that you can't guarantee that every meal has a suitable place to go to. To eat, most of them just buy some fast food to carry in the backpack, and take 2 bites when hungry. But Peter was so hungry that he ate all the things they brought in their backpacks before they had 2 meals, so the two had to change their itinerary. After taking the first bus, they went to the nearest bus, a small town. The prices in this town are not high, but Peter still ate thousands of dollars of things. Credit cards are not accepted here. The cash that Steve brought will be used up quickly, so the two have not started a road wandering trip. This is the end. Steve had to call Coulson to send him money. In the end, S.H.I.E.L.D. drove the two of them to their destination, and solved Peter's meal problem by the way. Since the last time Schiller took Spider-Man and Pikachu to loot S.H.I.E.L.D.'s food, they have urgently developed a new compressed dry food with nutrient solution, which can provide a lot of energy beyond ordinary people's needs, which has avoided a problem. The embarrassing situation where all the restaurants on the road were emptied by Peter. After arriving at the place, Steve began to investigate the trail of those ninjas with the little spider. Although Peter learned a lot in the process, he still messed up most of the things. He has superhuman strength and resilience, but the only thing is that he talks too much and moves too much. In the beginning, when Peter didn't understand anything, it was fine, he just followed Steve's obediently to see how he investigated the information, but then Peter learned a little bit, he had a lot of words and a lot of words in his bones. Motion genes are starting to get sick again. Peter learned a little trick, so he felt he could do better. Steve wanted to climb over the wall. He jumped on the top of the wall. Steve wanted to get close to a security guard and stunned. He went straight from the roof, climb up, then jump in front of the security guard, say hello, and punch him in the face again. In short, two guys with completely different combat styles, with no tacit cooperation, screwed up all reconnaissance operations. Fortunately, the group of ninjas seemed to be certain that no one would come from the desolate west. Their traces were easy to check. Not long after, Steve and Peter found a small stronghold of theirs. What happened next was even more speechless. Originally, what they had to deal with were just a few low-level ninjas. Steve had a good estimate. Their trip this time was just a warm-up. Although those ninjas jumped around, they would disappear suddenly, but they couldn't actually fight. But the problem was the disappearance. Steve swung his shield over, and the ninja disappeared, followed by Peter, who was trying to scare the ninja and make a face for him. The hard shield hit Peter's arm with a sound of bang, and it was broken on the spot. This is the first time in his life that Captain America has opened fire on friendly forces, and the effect is quite outstanding. Steve told me that it would be better to deal with these enemies from behind, so I swung from the beam to attack them from behind, but who knew he changed to a frontal attack again? I never knew he was so powerful big. I just flew upside down and was photographed on the wall. Those ninjas were knocked down by him in 3 or 5 blows, but I was knocked down by him in 1 blow. Peter said pitifully. Schiller couldn't hold back his laughter. Peter said resentfully, laugh, laugh. When I came back, I had been laughing with Coulson, Natasha, and Matt for several days. Schiller tried his best to hold back his laughter. He comforted Peter and said, "Don't be sad, you should feel honored. The person who was flung away by the captain's shield last time was the head of Hydra. I know I talk a lot, but I can't control myself. I'm just like this when I get excited. Perhaps you've heard the phrase, sometimes words are stronger than fists, Schiller said. After a while, Steve didn't come, but Natasha came, and the female agent said with a headache, Stark went to talk to Chief Nick about something, and he bumped into Steve who came back, and the two of them overturned the sky. Then what are you doing to me? I can't pull them away. The director has asked someone to pull them away, but the problem now is that Steve keeps mentioning Stark's father, and Stark doesn't believe that Steve is his father's old comrade in arms, Captain America. Quote. Or he believed it, but didn't want to admit it, Schiller said. Natasha covered her forehead and said, in short, as the senior psychological consultant of S.H.I.E.L.D., you must now come to mediate. Natasha saw what Schiller wanted to refuse. She said, listen, the current situation is like this, Iron Man and Captain America are quarreling, and Director Nick wants to participate in mediation, but the two of them join forces to scold him alone. Coulson also wanted to go to persuade the fight, but each of the three thought that Coulson was biased towards each other. Nick felt that Coulson should help him to persuade the conflict between the two. Stark knew that Coulson was Captain America. He is a loyal fan of Coulson, who thinks he will definitely take sides, and Captain America thinks that Coulson is a good person and should not be misunderstood by the other two parties. Simply put, the three parties hold their own opinions and do not trust each other, but there is really no more credible fourth party at the scene. Obviously, Nick wanted both of them to join the S.H.I.E.L.D. team, which is why this is the case, right? Natasha was a little surprised by Schiller's sharpness, but she still said, I think it's a good plan for everyone. After all, if two people go their separate ways, there will be many problems, such as this time Steve and Peter. But obviously it's Peter's problem, not Captain America's, that Steve and Peter don't act well, Schiller said. Peter's resentment deepened. He said, hey, doctor, you just comforted me. Schiller said, when it comes to persuasion, I have a better candidate. Saying that, he lifted Pikachu by the neck, who was sitting next to him, and threw it into Natasha's arms. Natasha grabbed Pikachu's two short hands and raised it to her face and said, I know you have a talking yellow-haired rat, but what's the use of it? It can't even beat Nick, the weakest of the three. Quote. Trust me, sometimes words are stronger than fists, Schiller said. A few hours later, it was getting dark, and there was a loud bang-bang outside Schiller's clinic. As soon as he opened the door, all four of Steve, Stark, Coulson and Natasha were there. Pikachu was held in his arms by Iron Man in battle armor, and Stark covered it with his hands. The mouth of a yellow-haired rat. Schiller opened the door, let a few people in, and said, you better not be photographed by reporters doing what you are doing now, Stark, or the Animal Protection Organization will go crazy. No animal protection organization will protect a rat like this, Stark said, and he roughly picked up Pikachu's tail and threw it to Schiller. Coulson was 10 years older, and Natasha leaned against the door frame again and said, Doctor, you really provided us with a very effective solution. She gritted her teeth on the word, very effective. Schiller handed the phone to Pikachu to let it charge. Steve sat down with his forehead covered and said, God, I don't even know what just happened. I thought Peter was the noisiest person in the world, but I didn't expect. As he spoke, he showed a painful expression. Obviously, the recent rounds of poisoning made the good-natured Steve almost collapse. Reading www.uakanshu.com. He is indeed the noisiest person in the world because Pikachu is a rat, Schiller said. It used swear words I've never heard in my life, and scolded everyone in the room. Nick couldn't even find a chance to interject. With a Canadian accent, he took S.H.I.E.L.D. from top to bottom. Everything from Nick Fury's blindfold to the glass on the desk. He babbled for at least 6 hours, not a word was repeated, and the walls of S.H.I.E.L.D. were about to carve its sound. I don't know how he can hold so many words with such a small body. Coulson said in a trembling voice. We had to feed him to gag him, but he ate a month's worth of donuts in the office, emptied all the juicers, and to stop him, all of us all have to fight in person. He also blew up 4 cell phones, and an Iron Man Mac, Natasha said. That included Nick's advanced security cell phone, so he now has to go to the maintenance department himself to restore the inside data. But at least the persuasion is very effective, isn't it? When you joined forces to catch it, did you feel the joy of unity? Schiller said gloatingly. Stark, who suffered the most, gritted his teeth and said, "Yeah, I never imagined that I would be able to chat with this old antique about how to cook mice for half an hour. I think you now know what I often say." "Yeah," Steve spoke first, then Stark looked at him. Sparks sparked in their eyes, but they still said in unison, "Words are stronger than fists." Chapter 51. Peter said while eating, "It seems that the situation is not optimistic. When I went to see Mr. Stark in the laboratory yesterday, Colonel Rhodes seemed to be persuading him all the time." Peter said, "Although I don't understand these things, I know that if those mechas of Mr. Ristark fall into the hands of the military, it may not be a good thing. As a friend of Mr. Stark, Colonel Rhodes may be embarrassed. After all, he also represents the interests of a group of people," Peter said. "You're smarter than I thought. I thought you wouldn't understand the current situation." Peter shook his head and said, "Actually, I really don't understand, but I know that everyone wants those mechas because they are really strong. No, it's because it's a weapon. If it was just a sweeping robot, even if it could clean New York in an instant, the military wouldn't be so interested in it." Peter was a little silent. He said, "I don't think the mecha should be handed over, but I know Mr. Stark is under a lot of pressure. Do you think I should? Or should I go to comfort him or persuade him for a moment? I can't do nothing, can I? I think you should settle your own affairs first. If you can completely control the power of spider mutation, maybe these things are trivial for you." As Peter said, the next day, Schiller's psychological clinic welcomed an unexpected guest, that is James Rhodes, that is, Colonel Rhodes. He said to Schiller very bluntly, "The military needs Stark's mecha technology, but he seems to have an unclear attitude. I just want to ask you, what is his plan? Does S.H.I.E.L.D. play a role in it? Some characters." "Actually, you don't want to come either," Schiller said. "I can see it." Rhodes twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "It seems that it makes sense for Tony to charge you such an expensive consultation fee. Obviously, your boss knows that you can't ask Stark this question, otherwise S.H.I.E.L.D. will get the answer faster than you. But it's useless for you to ask me. The military needs Stark's mecha. He can give us an advantage in many places, and save a lot of people from dying. You didn't realize that your reluctance has made your words extremely dry. Colonel Rhodes, I know you are also in a difficult situation. The military has repeatedly persecuted Stark, but he is your friend. So you can only make yourself feel better by deceiving yourself. In fact, you know what these armors will be used for, but as long as you convince yourself that it may be beneficial to do so, you can recover from the guilt of persecuting your friends, a little. It is the duty of a soldier to obey orders," Rhodes said. "Indeed, but what about Stark? What about your friend? Repeatedly violated your friend's wishes, forced him to sell his own interests, and used friendship to kidnap him. You actually always knew how much Tony values you. Stark doesn't have many friends, but you are definitely one of them, maybe the most important one. You know that he is willing to pay these prices for you, and is willing to do what he hates the most, compromise and bow his head. You know, Stark will be willing sooner or later. If you are cornered by your boss, he will definitely save you." "Stop talking," said Rhodes. He pursed his lips tightly into a line. Schiller pressed the button of the ballpoint pen, and the crisp sound woke Rhodes suddenly. Schiller said, "Maybe it's because you have something in him that he is willing to do. The advice I can give you is, maybe those are the things you should keep the most. Stark's friendship is more precious than the military, and it's not because he's richer. It's the qualities that an arrogant genius sees in you, the qualities that he doesn't even have, and that makes him willing to pay these prices for you, more worthy of your persistence and pride than those false honors, isn't it?" Rhodes was silent. The next day, when Schiller went to the Stark building, he met Rhodes walking out. There was an adjutant behind him, and the adjutant's face was clearly happy, and they seemed to have got something they wanted. But Rhodes' face didn't get better at all. He still had a tense expression on his face. He didn't look at Schiller, so he walked straight over. After going upstairs, Stark stood in front of his armor again, and carefully looked at his work. "Looks like you've made a decision. They got what they wanted, right?" Schiller asked. "Okay." Stark turned. He first tightened the muscles in his shoulders, then suddenly relaxed, dropped his shoulders, let out a breath, and said, "I know, I should stick to your previous advice, that right? But I didn't do it. I knew it was right. I didn't have to pay any price. I still didn't do it. I knew it wouldn't work. Schiller sat at the table with the case and wrote in the notebook. He didn't look up, but said with a sigh, "Many people are willing to pay a huge price to pursue emotions. Compensation, especially for someone like you who has never lacked material conditions. You would rather give up the result of maximizing your interests than have the heart to see roads caught in the middle. You paid the price and bought back his temporary friendship with you. Yes, I know what you want to say. You are friends, you think so, and so does he. But especially if both parties are not so happy, this friendship can last. You keep paying for it, and sooner or later you can't afford it. When you can't afford it, maybe roads will understand you, but the world won't." In the end, Schiller said, "When you raise the appetite of those people, the price you have to pay for love will never end." Stark said, "It's not that I haven't thought about this problem. I know that once I let go, I will keep losing. They can use roads to persuade me to hand over some of the mecha technology, and then one day, they can force him to persuade me to hand over all the mechas, or build more war machines for them. From the time I knew how many civilians my weapons hurt, I've known that wisdom brings not only wealth but disaster," Stark said, pressing his finger to his eye socket and saying, "I've only recently thought about it. Understand this problem, the ultimate outcome of a genius, there is always no retreat. When everyone knows that you have a brain enough to save the world, they will also have the ambition to let you destroy the world at the same time." After being silent for a while, Schiller stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Outside the window of Stark Building was the sunset of New York, www.mtlnovel.com. Stark followed his gaze, the kind of dazzling light made with a hazy color in front of his eyes. Schiller said, "What do you do when you have nowhere to go?" Stark said, "This is my home, and Pepper, Jarvis, and all of Stark's. In the end, no one can force me to hand over here. If they want more." Stark's eyes that always contained various emotions stared directly at Schiller. His expression was not heavy at all, but calmly said, "... Iron Man never backs down." Schiller looked at him and asked, "So, have you ever thought about overturning this ridiculous and boring negotiating table? You're like a degenerate devil. It's much better than praying to God." "I never pray, I don't count on God, I don't believe in those bizarre tricks, those absurd rumors and legends." As soon as he finished speaking, Stark saw that everything in his laboratory began to tremble slightly. Then, everything floated up. In an instant, it was like losing gravity, everything was floating in the air, cups, notebooks, computers, wrenches. The sunset light outside the window shone on the places where these things should not receive sunlight. Schiller stood in the center of everything, and the light behind him cast a long shadow in front of him. The shadows of everything overlapped into a huge web, and Stark stood in the middle of it all. He stretched out his hand, and a drop of water from the cup fell on his fingertips, and Stark looked up and looked around. He saw the countless ordinary debris in the air, and the ordinary ceilings and walls overhead. He saw a door to a new world. Schiller and Stark stand together in front of a damaged Mark II mech. Stark said, "Listen, the problem now is that the braking system here is completely broken, and we need to fix it before we can do it." Having said that, he picked up the wrench and stepped forward, and began to tap the mecha. Schiller stood behind him and said to the symbiote in his head, "No, you can't eat his brain. But his head looks delicious, really delicious, and smells good." But, Schiller put his hands on his hips and covered his forehead with one hand. He reorganized his language and said, "You can't just eat people's brains, because..." Schiller paused for a long time. He thought, well, although this race looks strange, its taste is surprisingly consistent. "Eat his brain, we can do it ourselves," said the symbiote. "No, okay." Stark didn't notice it. He fiddled for a long time, then tapped the railing next to him with a wrench, changed the place, and continued to fiddle and said, "Magic armor. This sounds really good. I think it is a special kind of atomic force. What do you think is the best form of application for it? Concussion, or extreme compression?" Schiller asked in his head, "What is the best form of application? Concussion or extreme compression?" "It's decomposition and reconstruction," said the symbiote. "It's decomposition and refactoring," Schiller said. As he said that, he directly pressed his hand on the joint that had not been repaired, and a large piece of parts there flashed, and when it returned to its original position, it was brand new. Stark stood up, His eyes widened, and he folded his arms and said, "The so-called magic you're talking about looks much stronger than the weightlessness you demonstrated. It's me who's great. I'm great, I'm great, I'm great." The symbiote began to squeal in Schiller's mind again. Schiller said, "Okay, okay, you are the best." He has to say that the symbiote is still better than magic. After all, his current magic ability is only low level, and it's okay to use it to bluff people. When it comes to playing, he has to rely on the symbiote. Reduce the armor, it can be very small, the symbiote said in Schiller's mind. Shrink the armor, Schiller said. Of course I have considered this. My Mark V, in the subsequent version, was originally intended to be compressed into a suitcase, but it has not been developed yet, and it is not possible to carry it around at will. I think the suitcase plan is a bit conservative. Can it be smaller? Certainly. How small do you think it can be compressed? Schiller asked the symbiote in his head. How small do you think it can be compressed? A bottle of fear venom. Can it be compressed to the size of a vial of fear venom? Schiller asked. I want to drink, the symbiote said. Schiller rolled his eyes angrily, and he would even haggle. After the symbiote happily finished drinking a bottle of wine, he said, a cigarette can be compressed to the size of a cigarette. After Schiller told Stark, Stark walked around the room excitedly, saying, it's really atomic level structure and reorganization, and if you put it that way, maybe it's more than a cigarette. Small, maybe even nanoscale. Can it be smaller than a cigarette? Schiller asked in his mind. Yes, but the deployment will explode, said the symbiote. So Schiller said to Stark, it can actually be made smaller, but I can't make sure it's safe to unfold. Stark said, in short, let's start, come up with a technology that is more transcendental, and then I will throw all those old versions of the armor to the military, let them help me deal with the garbage, and save money. Pepper will be happy with my e-waste disposal fee. There are so many benefits of being armed at any time, Stark said, clenching one hand into a fist and pounding the palm of the other, and I can even shove a full-body Jarvis into one. In a mobile phone with such a powerful smart housekeeper, can you believe it? Schiller said, God bless Jarvis. After a while, Stark put the slightly worn Mark II down from the shelf. Before he could see it clearly, a gray fog flashed and the Mark II disappeared. Then Schiller reappeared, holding a metal cigarette in his hand, and handed it to Stark. Stark, this is it. Otherwise what do you want? There shouldn't be any spellcasting spells. I mean, such as rituals, and staff. No need, that's too low-end, Schiller said. Stark blinked, he suddenly had infinitely beautiful expectations for magic. But then, this expectation just drove Strange crazy. He's just a mage, how can Iron Man think of it as an omnipotent god? No matter what, Iron Man is a, let's put it leave it to the omnipotent magic, look. Hearing that the Supreme Mage still needs to prepare to cast spells, Stark called Strange a low-end mage, and Strange was so angry that he almost broke his staff. No matter how much Schiller's performance makes Strange, who will get along with Iron Man in the future, collapse, now he surprised Stark very much. He said, how do I turn it into a mecha? How do I wear it on my body? Schiller asked in his mind, how would he turn it into a mecha? How would he wear it? The symbiote burped and said, think about it in your head. Think about it in your head, Schiller said. Stark was stunned for a moment, then hesitantly recalled the original weapon of the Mark II in his mind. Almost instantly, the Mark II was worn on his body. There was no process in this change, it was almost a reorganization at the atomic level. Stark said, what is the principle of this? Schiller asked in his head, what is the principle behind this? The symbiote said, mind disturbance. Schiller said to Stark, mind disturbance. You mean brain waves or something? Or bioelectricity? The symbiote in Schiller's mind was a little confused, and it seemed that he could no longer answer the question, so Schiller said, please don't use science to explain magic, it's easy to use. Stark was scratching his head and wanted to start researching immediately, so he turned his face and said to Schiller as if he didn't recognize anyone, okay, I know, your amazing magic, you wait, sooner or later I will use it better than you. Then he saw off the guest. Schiller was almost invited out of the Stark building, but he wasn't angry, as Stark always does. Once the experiment's addiction was committed, he didn't care about anything. As soon as he got back to the clinic, he saw Steve waiting for him. Steve said hello and said, Nick asked me to run an errand, he wants to see you, I think it might be something to do with Stark. Then Schiller shouted into the air, how about $10 million an hour? Chief Nick. You're talking to a lion. A voice suddenly came from the phone hanging on Steve's waist. Schiller shrugged and said, okay, I originally wanted to give you an invoice of 100 million yuan. The other side was silent for a while, and then said, there is an invoice for late payment of 50 million yuan. Deal, said Schiller. After a while, Schiller came to the Shield International Reception Center again. Nick, who was wearing a blindfold, shook hands with Schiller. Then the two sat down face to face. Coulson poured them a cup of coffee. For Schiller is espresso. Schiller drank the coffee, but Nick picked up the cup and drank it slowly. Schiller said first, let's talk about business first, or invoice first. Invoice first, Nick said. After a while, Nick asked him, I know Stark gave the mecha technology to the military, but it doesn't matter, we don't want those mechs. What you want is him. SHIELD was created by his father. If you mention this to him now, you won't want him to join in your life. Also, let him join, you can talk to him, don't come to me, it's useless to ask me, I'm just a psychiatrist, not his father. We didn't ask you to persuade Stark, and we knew he wouldn't listen. What do you think of our idea? A team of people with special abilities. It's good in itself, but it depends on who they work for. Isn't it for SHIELD? So who does SHIELD work for? Nick frowned, decisively bypassing the topic. He said, okay, we want to invite you to join. You also said that it's a team of people with special abilities. I'm just an ordinary person. The long jump has never exceeded 3 meters. Nick opened his mouth. He thought Schiller was taking him for a fool. www.mtlnovel.com. Listen, we don't care how you disappear and suddenly appear a few hundred meters away, nor do we care about that yellow guy with a Canadian accent. Where did the rat come from? And you can ignore your quaint horrific psychoanalysis, but a certain neurologist himself told us that you threatened him with a floating ballpoint pen. Schiller said to the symbiote in his head, you can't eat other people's brains at will in the future, except for strangers. Schiller said, do you believe in magic in this world? Some scientific forces have created these special abilities, so I also believe that there are other forces that create other people. Are you one of them? No. I'm just an ordinary person, but I think I can exchange a piece of information for my freedom. What about magic? That's right, I believe you should have the authority to mobilize satellites to find out where the connection went to a missing network in New York. Nick frowned, but Schiller didn't tell him any more. The wireless network of the New York Temple should also rely on the network system of modern people, not some magic network, but they use magic to cover up the way to access this network. If Nick checked it out, he would definitely find some clues. The reason why Schiller didn't refuse strongly was that in the various major events that followed, he had to rely on the Avengers to save the world. He wouldn't have to deal with those enemies by himself, and he would not fight with the Lizardmen and the Red Hulk, Fist. At most, for the safety of his own life, he can provide a little help, so he has to keep in touch with these superheroes, so that in future events, he can be fresh and refined. The weather in New York is gradually getting colder, and the early morning mist adheres to the glass of the windows, leaving a hazy white layer, which blurs the just-lit street lamps into a dim circle of light and shadow. Schiller was sitting at the desk in Stark's lab with a cup of coffee, and Stark walked over with a large pile of data and said, I need to remodel Joint 5, and then do Joint 13. A control experiment, and the data on the outer armor of number 7 arm is also problematic, I will readjust it later. Schiller said, can't you take a break? Aren't you tired? Stark spread the data on the table and said, you have asked me this question at least 20 times a night. It started at 7 o'clock last night and continued until 7 o'clock this morning. That's because you have been pulling me to do experiments since 7 o'clock last night, and I didn't even have time to drink a cup of coffee. Then what are you doing now? It's been 3 minutes, are you finished? We still have 2 groups of experiments to do, which must be done before 8 o'clock today. Schiller slumped on the table. Peter came out from behind the glass door of the laboratory holding 2 documents and said, Mr. Stark, there seems to be a problem with the external support of the number 5 leg bone, in the third data that Jarvis just gave me. The skeletal support structure seems to have a tendency to become unstable and the scaffolds are at risk of shattering, although Jarvis advised us to change the material. Flexibility are compromised if a keel that is too stiff is used. Stark took the material from Peter. He looked at it and said, "This is not a big problem." He stretched out his hand and pointed it to Peter on the blueprint. "We'll add a cushioning system to this joint later, and then move it down 2 centimeters. Peter touched his chin with his hand and thought. Stark stepped forward and pulled Schiller up. He said, "Usually it only takes 3 seconds for you to drink a cup of espresso, now you have been drinking for almost 5 minutes, hurry up and work." Quote, "My magical ability needs to be restored. I remember who said that it was a low-end operation." Schiller covered his eyes and said, "Can you get a complete set of mecha over here, and then I cast a magic spell on it, and then you can use it directly. Why do you have to disassemble it into parts one by one?" "Parts for experimentation," Stark said rather speechlessly. "Why do I sometimes think you understand these things very well, but sometimes I think you are a mechanical idiot." He spread the design out on the table, then pointed at the pattern and said, "See. When you've worked your magic with the shrinking and unwrapping of the Mark IV for me, I can focus the design on it. Performance and functionality, but once I improve the performance and functionality of a part, I have to retest whether it can shrink and expand, or whether the expanded function is the same as I expected. So I had to do a lot of modular experimentation to test whether a feature, when shrunk and expanded individually, would do what I expected it to do." "So is there any part that doesn't work as well as you?" Schiller asked. "What if it's the next one?" Stark said. "These rigorous science students." Schiller fell to the table again. Peter said, "I agree with Mr. Stark, the manufacture of this mecha is not a joke. Once you fly to an altitude of tens of thousands of meters and a certain part fails, it is too dangerous." Quote, "More than that," Stark said as he sorted through the blueprints. "Low power is not the same as high power or even overclocking, and you have to make sure it's as perfect as possible at each level of efficiency output. Performance." Then Stark grabbed Schiller's arm and pulled him to the edge of the test bench. Peter handed over a part. Schiller disassembled and reassembled it, and then Stark took it for testing, and Peter handed another part. Schiller then disassembled and reassembled them before taking them to the test. Peter and Stark were experimenting, but Schiller felt like he was a light bulb on an assembly line. The symbiote kept repeating in his mind, "Both of their heads are so fragrant, really fragrant, I really want to eat them. Can I eat one of them? Just eat one, and then eat the other next time. I want to eat the blue-eyed one first." Schiller found that the symbiote seems to be able to detect people's brain waves. When a person's brain starts to run fast, he will detect a pheromone released in their brain. The faster the person's brain activity, the more it smells better. Unfortunately, super geniuses like Peter and Stark, their brains are like a walking piece of super invincible fried chicken to the symbiote, and they can't refuse. Somehow, the symbiote also learned to play the sound of swallowing repeatedly in Schiller's mind, which made him hungry. Schiller finished twisting the last light bulb handed over and said, "Let's go eat something, aren't you hungry?" Stark threw him 2 compressed cookies and said, "Thanks to the new stuff from S.H.I.E.L.D., I can now work 40 hours straight." Schiller took a deep breath and said, "Aren't you sleepy? And you, Peter, you shouldn't have slept for almost 2 days, right? The reason I brought this kid here is because he has more energy than others." Peter also shrugged and said, "Since I gained the ability, I only need to sleep for a short time to stay energetic. I just slept in the lounge for 15 minutes and I feel pretty good now. How about you, a mage, why do you feel sleepy? Don't you have any refreshing magic?" Schiller didn't actually feel physically sleepy. With the symbiote, he could not eat, drink, or sleep, but anyone who had turned on a light bulb for more than 20 hours would also feel mentally sleepy. Schiller actually didn't understand the design of their armor at all, but whenever Stark came out from behind the glass door and excitedly showed his new ideas, Schiller would also act as a cheerleader to applaud him, if he didn't. In doing so, Stark would then dash through the glass door, and then come out with a new idea after a series of clanging explosions. Stark said, "How can you be so indifferent to such a great cause? This is a milestone in the history of human science. Maybe also magical. For the first time, we have combined the products of human technology with a new magical power. Together, don't you look forward to what they produce? I'm more concerned about another issue." Schiller said, are you going to call this series of armors Mark? I think it should have a new name. New name. What do you think of the S series? Your first name and my initials. Peter will be sad, and he was also involved in making it. Stark scratched his head. Peter said, I don't care about that, but compared to the name, I think the new armor should have a cooler appearance, something completely different from the Mark series. I think you can design it in blue, Schiller said. It goes well with magic and can be distinguished from your Mark series. Then let's hurry up. As soon as we've tested all the parts, we can start assembling it, and soon we can paint him a nice color. I think blue and silver go well good. In addition, Stark looked at Schiller and said, I think this mecha should have a little magic attack ability. But I'm sorry, the magic I learned doesn't have any offensive ability, Schiller said. What about the weightlessness technique? I think it's not bad to be able to float objects. You can think about magnetism. Schiller betrayed Magneto without any psychological burden. He said, maybe the magnetism is stronger than you think. By the time Natasha came over, the three had not slept for more than 50 hours. Schiller and Peter looked normal because of their superpowers, but Stark wore a giant panda eye. Natasha said, we almost sent you a missing person notice, and you disappeared for almost 3 days. But we had a great result. Stark said. Immediately afterwards, Natasha saw that Stark took out a cigarette, and the female agent smiled and said, it seems that you are still so confused. Since I joined S.H.I.E.L.D., I have stopped smoking. Is it too late for you to think about taking care of your health until now? Schiller asked her. Health? I'm not for health. Which Russians have you seen? The smoke alarm in the S.H.I.E.L.D. office goes off more than 20 times a day. I couldn't stand the noise from it, so I quit smoking. Hey, look here, what are you talking about? Look at me, see my results. Stark said. He threw the cigarette up, and in an instant, a mecha composed of silver and dark blue appeared on him. The shape of this mech is slightly different from the Mark series. It is thinner, smoother, and more suitable for Stark's body shape, and he will not emit any other machinery during the process of arming and activities. The sound is not so much a mecha as it is a set of uniquely shaped tights. Schiller stood up and said, you were 10 centimeters taller than me in your mecha, but now you are only 3 centimeters taller. Is this the point? Of course, because you don't wear mecha, you are 1 centimeter shorter than me. It's 2 centimeters shorter, sir, said Peter. You've got to lose your shoes. Stark took a deep breath, he jumped lightly, and the armor floated in the air, without as much movement as before. Stark said, thank you for giving me inspiration. I also feel that jet power is a bit pricey, however, this magnetic levitation system is still a bit immature, and I have to improve it. Schiller hurriedly asked Natasha, is Nick Fury looking for me? I can go over and give him another invoice, no matter how big it is. Natasha said, well, there is something. It seems to have something to do with the group of ninjas that Captain and Peter dealt with before. So, you're here to find Peter, that Schiller. Stark said. No, I've charged a lot of money from S.H.I.E.L.D., and I think it's necessary to give them all a basic psychological and emotional test. You know, it's very important for some field agents to prevent them from going crazy with anxiety. No charge this time, certainly. At this time, Coulson was standing at the door of Nick Fury's office with great confusion. He looked at all the people who came to this intersection and turned right. Natasha walked out of Nick's office, and Coulson stopped her and asked, what's wrong? Why did they take a detour? I remember that the closest way to the elevator is to turn left. Because our genius psychiatrist, who is expensive for consultation, is in the office on the left, waiting for someone to go to counseling. You actually invited him here. How much did he ask for? Could it be $100 million an hour? That's not true. Nick's report says $50 million an hour. Coulson took a deep breath and said, that is to say, if I go to him for psychological counseling now, it will be equivalent to making $50 million in vain. You can understand that too. There should be a lot of people lining up there. Can I still line up today? On the contrary, there is no one there. Natasha said with a shrug. After she finished speaking, she also turned right and left. Coulson shouted, you are going wrong. There is an emergency passage over there. The elevator is on the left. Natasha said without looking back, I want to exercise. You know, for health. Coulson was even more confused. Immediately after, Nick walked out of his office. Coulson greeted him. "Good morning, Chief." Nick nodded to him, and then said, "Natasha has recently withdrawn from the Stark Group affairs, and she will follow up the case related to the Hand Union. You mainly keep an eye on the one who will swing around. The boy, just let him not cause trouble." Coulson replied yes, and then he found that Nick turned around and planned to turn right. He grabbed his boss and said, "Director, the elevator is over there. If you go to the right, you have to walk for at least 5 more minutes. I've been exercising recently, and I plan to take the stairs." Coulson was literally full of question marks. He went straight to the left and muttered to the left. Seeing that the door of Schiller's office was open, he knocked on the door and walked in. Schiller was burying his head in writing. When he saw someone coming in, he very surprised, he raised his head and said, "Someone really came." Coulson was stunned for a moment and said, "Isn't it open now? I remember saying in the morning meeting that the psychological consultation will start this morning." "Of course, open the door. Come in, you're the first." Schiller stood up with a pen and opened the stool for Coulson. This enthusiasm made Coulson a little overwhelmed, and Schiller said, "Of course, you possibly the only one. I don't understand. $50 million an hour of psychological counseling can be done for free and reimbursed by the Bureau, why don't they come?" "Probably because I asked for $50 million, and Nick agreed." "What's wrong with this? Doesn't this mean that the director is very sure of your level?" "Well, putting aside some of his macroeconomic understanding of funding and the flexible use of reimbursement in the system structure, have you ever thought that maybe it was his affirmation of me that made no one here come here?" "You mean, they think your level is too high?" Schiller said speechlessly. "Are you really a level 8 agent? What level is Natasha? Shouldn't the full level be level 100? Which agent would be willing to find a very powerful psychologist and see all the secrets in their hearts? I thought it was just some simple emotional conditioning, such as releasing anxiety or something. Then you can just go to the door and smoke a cigarette." "That won't work, the smoke alarm here is too sensitive," Coulson said. "Okay, do you want to come here to relieve some depression?" "Actually not, because I think the captain and you seem to have a good relationship. I want him to sign my entire set of fan cards. Can you ask him for me?" Schiller spread his hands and said, "Okay, I know that, but whoever made me earn this money, if that really relieves your anxiety. Give me the card, I promise he'll sign one. Even if it doesn't fall, it's worthy of my $50 million 1-hour consultation fee." After Coulson left, Schiller was drinking coffee leisurely in the temporary office, but before he could finish touching the fish for the morning, he just opened the door to get some air, when a sharp alarm sounded suddenly and there was a sound on his head. A small device glowed red, and then began desperately calling the police. Schiller was startled, but his spider sensor didn't respond at all. For safety, he was ready to flash at any time, but with a sharp chirping, the fire sprinkler was turned on, and the sprinkler instantly sprayed a large amount of water mist. If Schiller hadn't hid quickly, he would have been drowned. Coulson and a few agents ran over, looked up at the smoke alarm, and then glanced at Schiller, who stared at them with a coffee cup. "No smoking here. I don't smoke." Coulson showed a suspicious expression and said, "Natasha had the same expression as you when she was caught. Did you throw the cigarette down the drain of the sink?" "Of course not, I don't smoke indoors." Coulson really didn't smell any smoke. He looked up at the smoke alarm that had been blaring, and said, "Well, it looks like this thing is broken again. How on earth did you make a smoke alarm make a noise of hundreds of decibels? If you have 32 fires in your home a month, you'll understand." The symbiote said in Schiller's mind, "I'm a little dizzy and I feel a little sick, let's go." Schiller said, "It seems that today's psychological consultation is over. If it is less than an hour, it will be counted as an hour. Don't forget to ask Nick to settle the bill. I will go first." Schiller left decisively, because he knew that this was not an accident. Some people didn't want him to stay there anymore. After all, every time he went downstairs, he had to take a 5-minute detour, which was a long time-consuming journey. Humans are always like this. When they don't have mind-reading skills, they always fantasize. Some people can understand them and understand what they are thinking. Of course, this is more likely because of Nick Fury's eclectic talent management system in S.H.I.E.L.D. After returning to the clinic, Schiller, who had not slept for dozens of hours, planned to take a nap. The symbiote played him a very hypnotic music, which made him fall asleep quickly, but before he could fall into deep sleep, just woke up by a phone call. What? Then what's the use of you looking for me? Go to Pepper. She's busy. Then am I not busy? Well, I'm not busy, but you can't let me enter the lab again. I really don't want to screw the light bulb anymore. Yes, I know that you are a great battle armor that crosses the age, not a light bulb. Can you tell the truth? Jarvis found something wrong with the parts repository. Wrong number of parts. Are you sure you didn't count it wrong? Well, I know you're serious, but how can I help with this? I can conjure the few parts out of thin air for you, no, not even magic. Quote. It's hard for me to say. Schiller paced in the clinic's living room. Perhaps you should ask Jarvis. Speculation, he's more than just a computer now. Jarvis is a little hesitant. Then don't you know the answer? Or do you actually think of the object of suspicion, but you just don't want to admit it? No, of course my mind-reading skills can't be used for this kind of thing, don't be kidding. I can tell you that there is an 80% chance of the object in your mind. After hanging up the phone, Schiller grabbed Pikachu, rubbed his cheek and said, a solid steel fortress is always the first to be breached from the inside, which is really hard to say. What's the trouble with that guy in the tough dress? Pikachu asked. It seems that something is missing from his armor. His smart butler gave an answer to a suspect he didn't want to hear, and now he's doubting his life. You humans always like to make yourselves troublesome. Pikachu concluded. That kid named Parker, when he is playing games, he is worried about killing the hostages in it. It's just a game, even if the hostages die. Yes, but the kidnappers are gone, so we won't be counted. So you rushed over and killed the hostage first. Otherwise, that kid is always dawdling. What can I do? You are entangled in too many meaningless things, always substituting yourself too deeply, and you are full of unnecessary worries about things that have not happened yet, but you are worried about what has already happened. What happens is always escaping. I really didn't expect that, as a rat, you could say such incisive words. Of course, I'm Detective Pikachu. In the Stark building, all the lights in Stark's laboratory were extinguished, and only some lights of the instruments were flickering faintly, like stars. www.mtlnovel.com. Stark leaned on the experimental table, sitting on the ground, a symbol beating on his phone beside him indicated that Jarvis was there. I'm trying to comfort you, sir. So you turned off the lights. Stark's voice was hoarse, and he was tired from staying up too late. It might help you relax a little bit, and dim lighting helps to relax your brain, Jarvis said. Stark closed his eyes. He changed to a more relaxed position, leaned on the experimental bench, he curled one leg, then put his arm on it, raised his head, and said like a dream, maybe this is retribution. The weapons of the Stark group have displaced countless people, so the people I once trusted will also leave me one by one. We're not sure yet that Mr. Obadiah is the murderer, Jarvis said. In the analysis, he's only about 96% likely. You can be more straightforward, Stark said. Sorry, I mean there's a 4% chance it's not him. Who might be left? Mr. Schiller 2%, Mr. Parker 1.2%, and yourself 0.8%. Quote. Schiller, you're expecting someone who can't even tell the mecha parts numbered 1 to 10 to steal the most important core. And Peter, that kid is a little stupid, but he won't steal anything, he's a fool who was shocked to see me smoking for a long time. I'm trying to comfort you, Jarvis said. In the end, Stark felt that all the voices of the world were gradually sinking, and he remembered Howard's face while he was half asleep. At that time, Uncle Obadiah stood with his father, who were both still young. Quote. Tony, he won't see me now, I know he must be disappointed, but I want you to tell him that the Air Force is not satisfied with the technology he gave them, they want more. My boss, General Johnson, has revealed however, they want the combined army to put pressure on Stark Group together. Or maybe they have more conspiracies. Rhodes said on the phone, and Schiller asked him, you've been excluded from the power center of this circle. Why? Because you've been shaken. Rhodes was silent for a while and said, no, General Johnson has never trusted me, because I used to be the subordinate of old General Andro, and the relationship between the two of them was very bad. That's why he forced you to go, right? Schiller sighed and said, what if you can't stand the pressure there? Before Rhodes could speak, Schiller said again. Tony is not seeing you now. It's not because of something related to the Air Force, there is something wrong with their Stark group, he needs to slow down now, it's been a few days, went out. Rhodes' tone has never been ups and downs, just like him, always serious and rigid, he said, I think we all know that the Stark group is not monolithic, and there must be some people among them in the army. Fang has colluded, and this person must be a high-level person. He continued. The military has grasped the technical information of the Stark group too quickly and in too much detail, which is very abnormal. Although I don't know more information for the time being, I don't want Tony to be betrayed. Do you want me to tell him about this? Maybe you didn't think about it, he already knew it, and the reason why it was delayed until now. I know that he is too easy to be soft-hearted, otherwise he would not compromise with the military because of me, but this time the matter is too serious, if he continues to be so indecisive, something big will definitely happen. Just as he was talking about this, Schiller heard the movement. He turned his head and saw two meteors streaking through the window, followed by two dazzling rays of light, flashing through the air, and a violent explosion sounded at the end of the sky. The two rays of light entangled together and fell down. Schiller looked out the window and said to the other end of the phone, something has happened. Schiller hung up the phone, he turned into a gray fog and walked through the Manhattan block, chasing where the two streamers landed, and came to an abandoned warehouse in New York's XC district. This location must have been chosen by Stark, because this is a rare deserted neighborhood in the city. Only by falling here will it not hurt ordinary people. Schiller slowly gathered his body, and before he could get in, the phone rang again, and Rhodes said hurriedly on the other end of the phone, send me a satellite positioning, I'll go right now, Tony may need my help. Quote. While holding the phone, Schiller flew to the roof of the warehouse in a flash, then looked down. There, Iron Man wearing a gold-red mecha is entangled with a huge robot. That robot is not the Iron King. Its whole body is pitch black, and some of its joints are decorated with gold. It is bigger than Iron Overlord, but more hideous. Schiller said to the phone, things have changed, you'd better come over quickly. The battle situation below is very fierce. Iron Man is not unable to defeat the big robot, but in the fall just now, he had to bring the robot to a place where there was no one, so he didn't have time to adjust the angle when he touched the ground. The side body is already a little inflexible. This is not the gangsters on the street when he usually saves people. Even with Jarvis' intelligent calculation system, Iron Man is still a little difficult to deal with. It can be seen that the robot seems to be prepared to deal with him. Iron Man flew into the air, and a low-altitude dive hugged the robot's waist and hit it against the wall. After a loud crash, a large piece of the roof collapsed and hit the two of them. Iron Man's situation is even worse. His entire shoulder mecha is somewhat damaged, and one arm can hardly be lifted at all. But the big guy didn't do much better. After being hit hard, he was electrocuted again, and a large piece of the cockpit was knocked off. However, there was no driver in it, and it seemed that someone was remotely controlling it. After discovering this, Iron Man came up with a way to deal with it. He first pretended that the mecha was out of control, climbed out of the falling steel frame on the roof, and then fell to the ground pretending to be defeated. The big robot also struggled to climb out of the steel frame and found that Iron Man had fallen to the ground. He directly picked up a steel bar and wanted to insert it into Iron Man's chest. Just as he was leaning his entire upper body forward to exert force, the Iron Man on the ground suddenly burst out, kicked its knee, followed by an elbow, hitting the robot's head. The upper body of the big robot was designed to be too bloated. Although it was very strong, it was inevitable that it would be unstable in the lower plate. It was sturdily hit by an elbow from Iron Man, and swayed to one side. Just when Iron Man was going to repeat the old trick and use electric shocks to defeat it, the big robot suddenly smoked. Jarvis started to call the police frantically, and Iron Man quickly stepped back, but he was still a step behind. The violent explosion raised a huge mushroom cloud in the warehouse, and the roar was audible for several blocks, and it exploded. Obviously, the designer of this big robot made its upper body so big for no reason. There's a big bomb in there. It's very powerful. When Schiller pulled Stark out of the mecha, his face was covered in blood. At least 3 of his ribs were broken, and it seemed that his ankle and arm were also broken. Stark himself does not have any superpowers. Although his brain is very developed, His limbs are obviously much worse. Stark raised his arm hard and wiped the bloodstains off his eyes. He saw Schiller and said to him with a sigh of relief, I have a mobile phone in my pocket. Jarvis will call for another mecha. Go to see if anyone's around. The explosion was too big. Apparently, his head also received some shocks. Schiller opened his eyelids to take a look. The blood in his eyes was very serious. He took out a small bottle of medicine, poured out a tablet, and let Stark eat it. The high concentration analgesic was very effective, and soon Stark said, This guy is coming for me. It has strong restraint on my mecha, and it can even predict my course of action. I cannot believe it. I can't believe what? I can't believe that the person who knew you best might have betrayed you. You have this skill, build a few more mechas, and you can win with one punch. I know, I shouldn't hide in the lab to escape, but I just want to digest the fact that you can't expect me to be emotionless like a zombie. Stark looks very negative now, his face is full of decadence and loss. Stark coughed a few times, and a trace of blood flowed down the corner of his mouth. Obviously, the impact just now made his respiratory tract uncomfortable. The euphoria brought by the high concentration of painkillers kept surging in his body. As if fascinated, he whispered. I knew his friend wouldn't be a good person, just as bad as him, I thought. No, or maybe he's right, Stark is not worth entrusting, and will always disappoint. Schiller put Stark's head flat, felt his pulse, and found that the heart rate was a little low. He wanted to take Stark directly, but Stark was like a drunk, and he would not leave. It can be seen that his desire to survive is not high now. So Schiller could only sit down beside him cross-legged, next to the wreckage of the Iron Man suit. The big pit where the big robot exploded and caused the explosion just now was smoking not far away, and the entire warehouse was blown up. Shards of rebar and cement, everything seemed like the ruins of the apocalypse. Schiller asked Stark, Obadiah is actually more like your father than Howard, isn't he? Stark did not answer him, as if he was asleep, and after a while he said slowly, When I made the first robot, Uncle Obadiah was very happy. He said, I am a man like my father. Genius. I always heard my father's name in his mouth, and he described him as a perfect man, intelligent, upright, firm, just. In my previous memory, every time he mentioned the name Howard, it was always with praise and nostalgia. But later, I started to dislike hearing the name less and less, and he stopped mentioning it. Stark's voice was hoarse, and he was talking almost out of breath. He said, I've seen a photo of them together, and it's on his desk. On that, they're all young and energetic. Maybe like you and Rhodes, Schiller said. No, that's different, totally different. I'm not like Howard at all, not at all. Rhodes won't be like Obadiah. Me and Rhodes, we are two complete opposites, we will never be copies of them, absolutely not meeting. After that, Stark no longer had a voice, and the effect of the analgesic made him fall asleep quickly. When Rhodes arrived, seeing Stark's serious injury, he hammered the wreckage of the mecha fiercely, and Schiller said to him, compared to his physical injuries, I think his mental state problems are bigger. Aren't you a psychiatrist? Can't you enlighten him? I am a psychiatrist, but not God. Obviously, he has now walked into a dead end. He feels that everything he is suffering now is retribution, his father's retribution, the Stark Group's retribution. He wants to hand over all this to others. It's up to him to ask himself. He once said that for the sake of his home, he would never back down, but now it seems that he really wants to give up all this by himself. Rhodes looked back at Stark, who was lying on the ground, and said, if he has the only price to pay, perhaps it is for his brilliant brain and sensitive heart. He said you two were completely opposites. Schiller said, he has an iron armor, what about you? Do you have a firm enough heart? Rhodes turned around, looked at the scrapped mecha in front of him, and said nothing. A violent explosion came from the rear of a car, followed by the sound of throwing smoke bombs. The slight sound released a white fog, which quickly enveloped everything in the field of vision. Stark hurriedly knocked down Pepper beside him. The sound of bullets hitting the bulletproof glass made the whole car vibrate. Stark scolded secretly, took out his phone and was about to call the mecha. Pepper pushed him and said, your injury is not healed yet, call Rhodes first and let him drive the mecha. Before Stark could retort, Pepper grabbed the phone, hid under the car seat, and called Rhodes and said, Tony and I were attacked on our way out of the hospital. Help us call someone. Quote, As soon as she finished speaking, there was a huge vibration sound from the ground. The sound of heavy objects falling to the ground was accompanied by a mechanical click. Stark looked back and saw several huge robots surrounded them outside the car window. The driver in the front seat had been shot, and Stark had to climb into the driver's seat by himself. Pepper stroked his hair and said, "Turn right to the square, so that the support can see us at a glance." Fortunately, Stark's safety car was of good quality. He instantly ignited and accelerated, and began to flee for his life. He hammered the steering wheel and said, "Fortunately, we were discharged at night." Then he turned around and saw 5 or 6 big robots chasing behind his ass. Stark said, "I have to go out and fight. If they're going to blow themselves up here, that's bad. This is the center of the city, and it's not far from the Presbyterian hospital. If so many robots die here, I'm afraid the entire hospital will be razed to the ground." The speed of the car was getting faster and faster, and Stark could no longer control the car. He drifted in a corner, the tires left dark marks on the ground, and the harsh braking sound could be heard far away. Seeing that the nearest robot was about to jump onto the car, Stark heard a bang, and a figure swaying in the air kicked the robot's head and kicked it out. Peter landed on the roof with a bang, stuck his head into the cab and said, "Am I here just in time?" Then he looked up and said quickly, "Hey. Listen, don't go straight, turn left. There's a traffic jam ahead. If these big guys run past, all the cars will be crushed by them." After he finished speaking, he fired another spider silk, which quickly stuck to the wall of the building, and then stepped on those robots until he angered them all. One of the robots raised his arm and fired a rocket at him. The explosion sounded, Spider-Man was unharmed, but the door of a store was blown off, and the clerk inside was scratched by broken glass, and Spider-Man was not allowed to don't rush in and save him. "It seems that the Spider-Boy is not available anymore," Stark said. "These guys are making too much noise, and someone has to save people." Pepper said, "Rod must have called Steve and Schiller. Let's take care of ourselves first." The wound on Stark's body was still a little painful, and it was not enough for him to fully recover in just a few days. Then he looked up, and the shadow of a helicopter shrouded the car. Rod hung on the door of the helicopter and shouted at him, "Go south. Hurry, we can't fight them here. That will kill a lot of people." Stark gritted his teeth, twisted the steering wheel hard, and the car sped out to the left, spun around, hit 2 road stakes, and slammed into a street corner. Stark opened the somewhat damaged car door. Pepper was shaken a little dizzy, and Stark protected her from the car. Spider-Man directly broke 2 huge street lamps with spider silk, and then waved one of them, causing a lot of trouble for those robots. Stark shouted, "Jarvis! Armed!" Soon, a gold and red mecha flew over. After Iron Man was armed, he first carried Pepper and flew to the top of the building and put her in a safe place. Then, Rod also put it on. Mecha. This is a small factory that manufactures equipment parts, but fortunately, because it was too late, the workers basically got off work, and the security guards who heard the movement had already fled. When the robots arrived, Iron Man and Rhodes were gearing up, waiting for them. The little spider swung over from behind, followed by Captain America, because those big guys stepped on all the way from the city, and many people were injured, and the little spider's organizational skills were not very good, so they all relied on Steve to evacuate the crowd. Although Peter's melee combat skills are not strong enough, he is brute force, fast and flexible, making those tin cans dizzy and creating a good output environment for Iron Man. The sparks from a few palm cannons caused a small-scale explosion. Iron Man quickly shuttled among the giant robots. Rod also knocked down 2 robots. He shouted, "It can't go on like this. If they explode together, can't run away. It's not right, it's very wrong." Stark only reacted now. These robots are definitely not the work of Obadiah. Even if he takes away the core energy, he can't make so many robots in such a short period of time. This requires a complete military-industrial chain. Stark's military-industrial production line is in the hands of Pepper. Obadiah can't hide from her and produce so much in one breath. As soon as he finished speaking, one of the big robots that was hit by his palm cannon rushed towards him, and Spider-Man shouted from the other side, "Get out of the way. It's dangerous." The power of the Iron Man armor was turned on to the maximum, a rapid rise, a loud noise of boom, and a scorched black pit was blown out of the place. Fortunately, I modified the jet power, otherwise I wouldn't be able to withstand such a big impact. Saying that, he dived down again, quickly hugged a robot and threw it out. This time Iron Man learned to be smart, and immediately turned around and flew back after he was thrown out. As expected, there was another violent explosion. Stark's reaction was slow, but Steve behind him was not so lucky. He held his shield to resist the aftermath of the impact, but he was still blown up. What are these things? Iron Man floated in midair, looking at the charred wreckage on the ground. He said, I recognize that it is the number 7 part before the transformation, the version I gave to the military. He looked back at Rhodes, who was still fighting with the robot, silently raised the mecha, and then went to deal with the next enemy. A series of explosions sounded, but other robots joined the battle, and the place was almost blown into ruins. It has to be said that such tactics are very effective. A large number of explosions are always accompanied by a strong impact, which makes several people busy with coping. What's more cunning is that once a robot wants to escape this war zone, the superheroes have to take the initiative. Go after them and catch them, or if you let them blow themselves up in a residential area, that's bad. Although Iron Man gradually figured out the pattern, the time interval between the two attacks was too short. He didn't have time to improve his armor to deal with this kind of self-destructing infantry. 2 consecutive explosions sounded, and Iron Man was knocked out. A series of sparks. Seeing him miss, 4 or 5 robots immediately surrounded him, and they didn't plan to fight Iron Man closely. Their only purpose was to use an explosion to kill him. Just when the red light on the first robot's chest flashed, the ground shook again, a violent roar sounded, a huge arm grabbed the robot, and threw it out at once, causing it to hit the wall and explode. A steel monster 2 circles bigger than these self-destructing robots appeared. Iron Man got up from the ground and flew into the air. He said, "What is this? Where did they get so many robots?" The steel monster directly tore a self-destructing robot in half and dug out the bomb on its chest. Rhodes was also stunned. He said, "What's going on? Why did they fight by themselves? Can't you see that? They're not the same group." Captain America shouted. Now the situation on the field is extremely complicated. The superheroes have to deal with the self-exposing robots to prevent them from rushing out to explode. The steel monster seems to just want to shred these robots. Iron Man didn't know who to hit for a while, and Spider-Man didn't care. He was an enemy all over the world. While tripping over the self-destructing robot with spider silk, he also punched the steel monster. After a while, the self-destruction robot was almost solved. Either it was thrown out and exploded, or a bomb was dug out. As soon as they breathed a sigh of relief, they saw another huge figure appearing on the top of the building opposite. An enlarged version of a self-destructing robot jumped down. It was also painted in black and gold, but it was bigger than Iron Man's mecha. It was more than 3 times bigger, and there was a huge roar when it landed. "God, what is this? I've never seen so many robots in my life." Peter said, "Could they still be a family of 3? Captain America walked over with his shield and said, "If that's the case, then from the body shape, you'll know who the son is." "You didn't keep the agreement between us," the robot who just jumped down said. "You tricked me." The steel monster also said. Obviously, the 2 robots were both driven by humans. Stark showed a shocked expression. He and Rhodes almost said in unison, "Uncle Obadiah, General Johnson." But before they could ask what was going on, the 2 giant steel robots became entangled. It can be seen that although these 2 robots are very strong, the 2 pilots are obviously unfamiliar, and they use rogue punches to fight. You give me a punch, and I give you a punch. Iron Man was stunned in the air. He didn't know who to help. Jarvis just helped him analyze his voice, and the person who spoke was indeed Obadiah, but what was going on? Are these self-destructing robots really not made by Obadiah? What happened to that General Johnson? Could it be that the 2 of them originally wanted to unite to deal with themselves, but they had internal strife? Iron Man felt that it was wrong for him to help anyone now, so he could only watch the fun by floating in the air. The steel monster punched and hit General Johnson's mecha. With a bang, the panel of the cockpit shattered. General Johnson took a step back, then waved his arms and said, "Howard's little valet. Now he has to stand up to protect his son. It's ridiculous that when he wants to shut down Stark's military department, he doesn't ask his good uncle's opinion." Quote, He never took your hard work seriously, but now you want to be a security guard for him. That old Andro said it was really good, the only thing that Rotten Howard did in his life was right. The thing is, I found a watchdog like you. The steel monster on the opposite side didn't make a sound, and then General Johnson took another step back and said to Rhodes on the other side, "Look, this is your tomorrow. You all like to follow Starks and call on you. Come on, friend." Oh, if he really took you as a friend, he wouldn't give you some outdated technical data. The friend across from us has been a watchdog for Howard all his life. What did he get? He didn't even dare to resist. Both Rhodes and Stark were about to speak, but Jarvis issued another severe warning: a high-energy reaction has been detected. Please evade immediately. Please evade immediately. Please evade immediately. 3, 2. In an instant, another violent mushroom cloud rose up, and the big guy that General Johnson was driving exploded even more extraordinary. A huge pit of several hundred meters was left on the ground, and half of the factory was blown up. No one expected him to be so decisive. Iron Man couldn't dodge in time. His mecha was almost blown to pieces, and the one that Rhodes was wearing was completely scrapped. Perhaps General Johnson made preparations in advance, but he was not killed at the center of the self-destruction, but stood up from a safe cabin with a remote control in his hand. You may think this is the end, but on the contrary, this is just the beginning, said General Johnson. Stark was hit again with blood on the head. He wiped his eyes and helped Rhodes up from the mecha. He said, "Your boss is really a little grumpy. Otherwise, how could I be cornered by him?" Rhodes laughed at himself. You are still unrepentant, Colonel Rhodes. None of the things Howard promised Obadiah have been fulfilled. He still only cares about his own son. Little Stark can close the most important thing with one mouth. The military industry system, ruining the half-life efforts of the previous generation. How ridiculous. For him, you refused my request several times, and only brought me a set of outdated mecha technical materials, but what did you get in return? You are just Iron Man's foil. He is beautiful light, you are unknown, like Howard and Obadiah. Quote. The barking of a loser. A voice came from the steel monster still lying on the ground. When we chose old Andro, it was because you were too stupid. After decades, you still haven't changed, so I still didn't choose you. www.mtlnovel.com, stupid. Obadiah's tone was very slow and light, and it didn't look like he was on the battlefield at all, but Johnson, who was even more angry, was smoking. He gritted his teeth and pressed the remote control fiercely, and dozens of robots flew over. They were smaller than those self-destructing robots, but they looked more advanced. Now you don't have mechas, and I have them, General Johnson said. Just like old Stark, he used his new invention to take my army. Now it's my turn. Ahem, it's been decades, and you still haven't figured out one thing. Obadiah's voice came, a suit of iron is useless at all. Hearing this, Stark exhaled and slowly relaxed the muscles of his shoulders. He said as if he was talking to himself. Maybe what he said was right, what they said was right. It's really useless to have an iron shell, it won't make me any better at all. Rhodes stared at the front. Those tall robots made them look even smaller with their bare hands. He said, "Don't be emotional, don't you think we should think of a way now?" Stark looked up at the army of robots that surrounded him, then turned to Rhodes and said, "Do you think we are like them?" "No, you are worse than your father." On a piece of wasteland that was scorched black by the explosion, Stark lowered his head and touched his chest. Compared with the huge robots opposite you, they seemed weak, but Stark was not in a hurry. Relax your tone, as if you were chatting with an old friend. Then, in the darkness of night, only the eyes of the robot flickered, like stars. Stark turned his head and asked Rhodes, "Want to have a cigarette?" Rhodes said, "No, thank you, I don't smoke." Immediately afterwards, he saw Stark take out a cigarette by himself, and then threw it into the air. In an instant, a thin blue and silver mecha was armed on him, and Rhodes swallowed. He swallowed and said, "Give me one, thank you." On the other side, General Johnson had just climbed back into the cockpit of a huge robot, and what appeared in his field of vision was a fist the size of a sandbag. Iron Man was about to deal with Johnson with Rhodes, but was stopped by the steel monster who stood up again, and he heard Obadiah say, "You know what I told you about your father, most of it isn't the truth. Actually, he smokes and drinks heavily, hangs with women, daydreams all day, and is good at whims. After messing up a lot of things, he will only let others clean up the mess for him. Those heroic stories about him were all made up by me. He's actually a complete asshole. But you know how I stopped him when he opened his mouth to say something stupid again. Iron Man had a bad premonition, but before he could answer, a fist the size of a sandbag appeared in his field of vision. Looking at Iron Man flying out, Little Spider rubbed his hands and said, "Okay, now the question is, who should we help?" Captain America patted the shield and said, "I think Obadiah is right. After all, he is Stark's elder, and he has more reason to beat him than me. But it's not good for us to look at it like this." "Then let's not look at it, let's go. There are still wounded people to be loaded into the ambulance." The other side. Iron Man dazedly got up from the pile of steel bars and said, "Wait. Uncle, well, Howard is a sucker, so am I. But I think there is a better solution than this. I think you can sit down and talk. Or have a board of directors or something. Don't always use your fists to solve problems." "You have no right to say that." With a roar of the steel monster, the huge robot jumped up and landed in front of him. Shadows shrouded Iron Man's armor. Obadiah said, "You will soon understand. What is your iron shell? It's not good to use, even if you change it to a different look." Iron Man was very helpless. Obadiah seemed determined to beat him up, and his anger rose. He said, "You will soon find out if it just changed its appearance." Having said that, he flexibly avoided the fist of the huge steel monster like a flying bird. Almost instantly, he flew to the back of the steel monster and punched it on the back. The steel monster waved backhand, and Stark flexibly dodged again. Although his current armor is lighter and thinner, the power system has been modified to be faster and more flexible. He stretched out his palm. The steel bars in the ruins next to him began to vibrate slightly, and then flew up in an instant, pointing straight at the steel monster. Jarvis said to Stark, "The magnetic control system is still being upgraded, and high frequency cannot be used. Running, and the energy is about to run out." Stark squeezed his fist, and the steel bar flew out towards the steel monster. Obadiah obviously did not expect this move. After all, the original style of Iron Man is a warrior. In addition to the palm cannon, most of the time he also fists with the enemy, but now this silver and blue mecha make him look more like a mage. With the swing of Stark's arms, the steel bars shot towards the steel monster quickly. Obadiah only had time to control the mecha, dodging more than half of the steel bars on the left, but there were still a few that hit his right arm. But he was much more decisive. The moment he was hit, he used his strength to jump out, and he hit the Iron Man in the air with an uppercut. A series of sparks appeared from Iron Man's mecha. Not to be outdone, he dived in a reverse direction and punched the Iron Monster's neck. The Iron Man shook slightly, grabbed one of Iron Man's legs, and put him on the ground, thrown out. Iron Man was shocked again. It happened that the place where he landed was the battlefield between Rhodes and General Johnson. Rhodes also fell into a disadvantage. Iron Man shouted, "Come on. Exchange opponents, let's start the second half." Quote, "This is a correct decision. Rhodes' mecha is stronger, but he is facing General Johnson. That huge mecha has 8 tentacles, and if the speed is not fast enough, it will be pulled out fiercely. More flexible mechs are better to deal with." So, Rhodes stabilized his body, pulled up and dived directly, and flew towards Obadiah's steel monster. After choosing the right opponent, the battle situation began to become clear. Stark used his high mobility to directly remove more than half of the tentacles on General Johnson's back. Without the tentacles to assist in moving, Johnson's mecha became the real iron can became Iron Man's sandbag, and after a few punches, it started to catch fire everywhere. The robots he summoned were basically eliminated by Stark using his high speed. On the other side, Rhodes, who had a head-to-head fight with the steel monster, was uncomfortable, but the steel monster had broken legs during the previous explosion. After a few rounds, the steel monster fell to the ground and seemed unable to stand up again. Rhodes walked up to Iron Man and said, "I once heard my former boss, General Andrero, mention that he knew your father when he was young, but I don't know what happened. Howard, that despicable villain. He used an order with the military to pick up old Andro. Originally, I was not supposed to be a little major general in the Air Force. That doesn't matter anymore," Stark said. I'm afraid you can't even be a major general now. Everyone knows that only Iron Man can make these mechas. I use the technology you handed over to the military, as long as... No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that although Howard is a bad guy, I think he does have something to learn from him, such as finding a right partner in the military. Of course, that's not you. Aren't you going to close Stark's weapons manufacturing department? Where did you hear the rumor? Johnson turned to look at Obadiah's mecha. Did my uncle tell you? Then did he tell you that every Stark is like this? We are very fickle. Just a few minutes ago, I changed my mind. Not only will I not close Stark's weapons manufacturing department, I also intend to officially working with the military. I happen to have a few ideas for exoskeletons for individual soldiers and auxiliary support systems for medical use. No, you can't do that. I've already promised Hammer's military. A fool will always find another fool. Obadiah's voice came from a distance again. Johnson's mech burst into a series of sparks, apparently hammering something inside. It seems that these mechas were made for you by that Hammer military engineer, but to be honest, these things are already outdated. Yeah, you only gave outdated technology to Rhodes. Johnson still hasn't forgotten to sow discord. Rhodes crossed his arms and said, he just gave me a cigarette, a very fashionable one. Stark didn't talk nonsense with Johnson anymore. He walked to the side of the collapsed steel monster, and then opened the cockpit. Obadiah was lying in it. He didn't seem to be hurt, but his face was very bad, like dying. Doctor, I need a doctor. Schiller appeared in response, and he spread his hands and said, I guess you don't need a psychiatrist like me. Of course, but don't talk nonsense, take him to the hospital quickly. The symbiote said to Schiller in his head, his heart. Schiller touched Obadiah's pulse and found that his heart rate was indeed very wrong. Obadiah coughed and said, the external energy core is not enough to drive such a behemoth. You manipulated your heart? Schiller asked. Stark tore off Obadiah's shirt anxiously, and found that there was indeed a scar on his chest. He said anxiously, hurry up. Send him back to my laboratory first. This biomechanical there is simply no way to go. That is simply overdrafting life. You are as arbitrary as your father, and you never listen to people's opinions. Obadiah said, but seeing the blood dripping from Stark's forehead, in the end he didn't say anything. You send him back first. Just right, I know a pretty good neurosurgeon, and you'll see him at Stark Tower later. After Schiller and Stark were gone, only General Johnson and Rhodes were left on the battlefield. Johnson was yelling frantically, you lunatic. Rhodes, do you know that the duty of a soldier is to obey orders? I am your top now. That old Andro has long since retired. Yeah, I retired as a general, and I can still get a high-paying job in Congress with a large pension. I went to Hawaii for 2 months last winter, and my granddaughter has just been admitted to Harvard. Johnson's mecha exploded violently again. After a while, he said, you will regret it, Rhodes. Stark has never been trusted, and you will regret being his friend. They are selfish, sensitive, suspicious, and will destroy everything sooner or later. They have a genius brain that can save themselves, but they won't save you, they won't save a watchdog. Rhodes took off his mecha and walked out. He looked around. This place has been completely destroyed. Not far away, the little spider and Captain America are taking the wounded to the ambulance. Most of them have been evacuated in an orderly manner, but many were injured by the aftermath of the explosion during the escape. 2. This will just be rescued. New York is very big, and the aftermath of this battle only spread to a few nearby streets. On the further roads, vehicles and pedestrians were still bustling. Soon, a purple-red glow lit up at the end of the sky, and dawn was coming. You're right, Stark is a bunch of rotten people, impulsive, willful, never considering the consequences, waiting for others to clean up the mess for them, but Iron Man is different. Rhodes looked at the light at the end of the sky, he reached out, took off his epaulette, looked down, pinched it on his fingertips, and then threw it on Johnson's face. Quote, Iron Man never backs down. He's in very bad shape. And apart from the risk of infection from the mess of wires he's made in his body, he's also old, and his body isn't as resilient as a young man, and there's a big risk of being injured and staying behind. The sequelae, even if it can survive the infection and inflammation, the body function has been seriously damaged. I think you can ask him if he has any last wishes. Stark thumped the table. Making a loud noise that startled Strange, the very tricky doctor said, "You better make sure that the fee you give me is worthy of your irritable temper." Quote, "I'm pretty sure that your courage is worthy of my force," Schiller said to Strange. Stark looked at Obadiah lying on the experimental bench. His pupils had begun to dilate a little, and an extreme emotion surrounded Stark. He didn't understand why Obadiah did this. "I've always wanted to prove to Howard that the biotechnology route I proposed is by no means useless. It can bring people strong enough power, and even if their bodies are too old to look good, they can still be perfectly controlled by the power of the body." Mecca. "But you're about to die," Stark said angrily. "What could be more important than life? Howard died before me." Stark was speechless, and he heard Obadiah sighing and saying, "It's a pity he died early." A complex emotion rose from Stark's heart. He knew that the relationship between Obadiah and Howard was not the perfect partner that many people imagined. When you are with a peerless genius, few people will not be jealous. Maybe Obadiah once thought to prove that he can do the same without Howard. It's a pity that there is no Howard, and he doesn't know who he should prove to. Obadiah is old, and maybe he knows that if he doesn't do it again, he will never have a chance. There must be a Stark who understands that he is right. If the old Stark can't do it, then the little Stark can also. I'll find a way to save him. Stark threw himself onto the experimental bench on the other side and began frantically rummaging for information. Now he has no time to think that Obadiah stole his mecha core. Over the years, Obadiah was almost his only relative, and now that he was dying, Stark had nothing to do. "Heart stent. We have to make him a heart stent," Stark said. Strange shook his head and said, "You really have no medical knowledge. His heart is about to fail. This is not a problem that stents can solve." Then hit a few more. "Unless you can recreate a heart for him with a machine, his current heart will not be able to function as a blood transfusion for the body at all, and within 3 hours at most, he will die of heart failure." "Are you a doctor who only speaks nasty things?" Stark asked angrily. Strange was even more angry than him. He said, "You rich man delayed my whole afternoon with a single word. I just tell the truth. He's not saved. Don't treat the doctor as God. You have made 7 or 8 holes in your heart, and God can't save him." Schiller patted Strange on the shoulder, and he said, "Can't you see the current situation? This rich man is so poor that he has only money left, and he is willing to pay any price to save his uncle, as long as if you can come up with a plan, the price is whatever you want." Strange rubbed his temples and said, "We are all doctors, don't I want to make this money? As long as he can be saved by medical means, then there is no one in this world who cannot be saved." "What did you just say?" Stark turned his head and asked suddenly. Strange was stunned. He said, "What did I say?" "Yes, a mechanical heart. Create a new heart for him." Schiller looked at his watch and said, "You only have 3 hours." After speaking, he glanced at Obadiah again. "This is still an optimistic estimate. I'm afraid that once more than 2 hours, even if there is a new heart, his whole body will be necrotic due to ischemia." Stark didn't say anything. He suddenly became quiet, and it seemed that he was no longer so irritable for a moment. All the threads of his brain cursed by knowledge were running frantically. "It's ridiculous. You want to replace a living person with a heart made by a machine. What about rejection?" Strange said. Stark turned his head and punched him. Schiller dragged him out of the lab. Strange rubbed his nose and said, "These rich people. Don't complain. Think about the 7 or 8-digit consultation fee he will pay you later. Do you feel better? Will he really pay that much? That's Stark. Look under your feet. A tile here may be your monthly salary." Strange rarely spoke, and it seemed that the upcoming large consultation fee did not make him any happier. After a while, Stark suddenly rushed out and said, "I have an idea. Yes, I have a solution. The arc reactor, that model. I need an assistant. Come quickly. Come here." Strange sat still, and Schiller could only stand up and say, "I'll do it. I hope I don't screw the light bulb again." After entering the laboratory, it was messed up by Stark. Schiller stepped over various documents and materials scattered on the ground. Stark began to tinker on a laboratory bench full of various complicated instruments. That model is not only useful for the composition of the energy response, its structure is very adaptable to the human body. As for the rejection response, the movements in Stark's hands suddenly stopped. He put his hands on the table and lowered his head. He said softly, I also almost died of rejection. Maybe this is retribution. Forget about your fatalism. Schiller glanced at Obadiah. He seemed to be still conscious, but the excessive ischemia made him speechless. He didn't look at Stark, but just kept staring at the experimental bench. Perhaps, the young Obadiah stood by the same way, watching Howard enthusiastically busy beside the experimental bench. At that time, they could do experiments all night, and then chat about these inventions while having breakfast. How to change the world. Howard was full of enthusiasm and ambition at that time. He was an unparalleled genius. Obadiah was more like a shadow of genius. Howard was born to change the world, and Obadiah, he just wanted to use himself, the ability to make yourself a little better. Obadiah felt that his whole body began to heat up, and a warm current flowed from his heart to his limbs. In the dimness, he saw countless pictures playing in front of his eyes. Howard died too early, but Obadiah thanked Howard for dying so early, which gave him a good enough friendship to recall before his death, which was the most passionate and glorious time in his life. A behemoth rose in his hands until it ruled the world. Thanks to Howard for dying too early, this kind of friendship was not gradually worn down to wither in the vicissitudes of life. It is always so bright, even before dying, it seems that there is no regret. You have to hurry. Schiller looked at Obadiah and said, we made some mistakes in our estimation. You have at most an hour and a half, and he has lost his mind. Stark turned around in a panic and said, no. Don't. Wait, don't be like this, how could he? Just like before you, the desire to survive is a very important thing. Once you don't have it, your body will begin to decay at a speed you can't imagine. Stark held the parts in his hand tightly, he didn't say anything, and turned around to continue the experiment. Schiller asked the symbiote in his head, can't you recreate a heart for him? No, his heart is missing something and needs a symbiote to maintain. If he leaves me, he will die. Schiller recalled, as if it was true in the comics, the old Eddie relied on venom to convert cells into a part of his body, and he would die without the venom. There are parts that can be combined. The symbiote said again. Schiller said to Stark, you can try to make a part, and I can combine it with flesh and blood by refactoring without fixing and stitching. Stark pointed to Schiller with a pen and blueprint, and said, the structure of the arc reactor can be used in the heart. Look here, we replaced the entire left ventricle, strengthened the heart muscle here, and then installed a new one here. Artificial heart pump. Schiller called Strange in, and Strange looked at the drawing and said, if only in theory, it's possible, but I advise you not to do it. The combination of human body and metal will be very difficult. Big risk. This is a problem that the medical profession has been unable to overcome, and you are not a doctor at all. Even if you can save him for a while, the subsequent maintenance of parts and metal aging are all problems. Schiller said, Obadiah seems to have been researching biomechanics. He must have useful information. Jarvis, can you find out where Obadiah is doing research? There was a buzzing sound from Jarvis, and then he said, calculations. Positioning. Positioning is successful. www.mtlnovel.com, Stark Industry site, also the former Stark Automotive Industry Group. The storage device has been detected. Those data have not been uploaded. Please wait a moment, I am using physical cracking. A few minutes later, a mech flew in, holding a heavy computer in his hand. Stark pulled out a USB flash drive and plugged it into the computer, and soon Jarvis said, the data is encrypted. The encryption is being cracked. The cracking is complete. All have been uploaded. Stark hurriedly turned to his console, and the moment he turned on the console screen, he was stunned. It was densely packed with documents and drawings, and Schiller couldn't understand what was written. After a while, Stark took 2 steps back and said, maybe he's right, maybe he's right. He found another way, a completely different way from mechanical armor. You're running out of time, Schiller said. No, now I only need half an hour. No, 20 minutes, these materials are already made. Jarvis will help me calculate right now. Let's start by building this model. An hour later, both Stark, Schiller and Strange walked out of the laboratory with exhausted faces. Strange's hands were covered in blood, and he said, how can there be such a thing in this world? You really use a pile of scrap metal made a heart, and then made it jump, God. Schiller didn't do much better either. Changing a heart was a tough job, and his chest was soaked with blood. Stark leaned against the wall, sat down slowly, and said, "Am I really like my father? Blindly arrogant and insistent. Do not." Stark looked up at Schiller, who was talking. "You are worse than your father." Then, next, I will start to focus on this final exam. Please open the first page of the textbook. Let's start from the table of contents and look down, from the first subsection of chapter 1 to the last of chapter 10. Sections, everything is the point. Turn down. The first 50 pages of this book must be recited except for the pictures, and all conceptual statements will appear on the test paper in the form of fill-in-the-blank questions. After the end of the third subsection of chapter 2 on page 60, the following parts will be there are essay questions and short answer questions. In addition, in the related content after Chapter 7, I will select a part of the important content to make a proposition for your final paper. The final paper is still 3,000 words, and the ratio of test paper to paper is 7:3. The usual score is 6:4. That is to say, if you can't get a good grade on the exam, then you will definitely fail the exam. In addition, according to the tradition of Gotham University, starting from the next academic year, I will prepare and organize additional psychology courses. If you want to participate in this course, you must have a total score of 85 in this final exam. As mentioned above, relevant clubs and clubs are also under preparation, and students who are interested in serving as managers and club leaders can come to my office after class. Okay, get out of class is over. Schiller closed the book and walked out of the classroom. Only then did the students at the bottom relax, and then began to mourn. My God, this book is thicker than my fist, and I have to memorize it all. You said, if I fail the test, will he give me a shot? I haven't seen him holding any pistols or revolvers. I guess he probably used cold weapons, such as stabs and knives. Who remembers what was said in Chapter 3? Where did the essay questions start? Help, Evans. Evans, are you there? Do you have any notes? Lend it to me. I've been here for more than half of the semester, and I haven't heard anything. Quote, if my dad knew that I worked so hard in college, he would definitely cry. Bruce was also sitting in the crowd, but he was not as flustered as the others, and it was not a problem for him to carry a book. He wanted to discuss some things with Schiller, about the construction of a private prison, but he could see that Schiller was in a very bad mood right now, so Bruce hesitated for a while, but still didn't leave with Schiller. After a while, Evans approached him, and he asked Bruce, did you hear what the professor just said about clubs and societies? I'd love to be the director, you know, the class discipline and the discipline of this course. I have always been in charge of the homework, but I would like to ask your opinion about the association. Do you plan to participate? Bruce understands what Evans means. There are not only interest clubs, but also learning clubs at Gotham University. Some popular courses will set up their own learning clubs, which is equivalent to the professor giving extra classes to students. Of course, all clubs will involve funding issues. Many societies want to join Bruce, because he is a very rich man. However, Bruce has not participated in any serious clubs. He is impatient with those clubs, and he doesn't want to be chased behind his for money. But the psychology club was different. He felt he could get some extra help here, so he said to Evans, I'll go to the professor and ask him if he can give me a club head position. As for the club, there is no interest, you can be the leader of the classroom in the club. Of course Bruce knew that Evans was Falcone's son, but Evans' family background was too common in Gotham. There were at least 6 or 7 sons of gang bosses in this class, but Evans' father. Just stronger. The people who usually mess with Bruce are basically the sons and nephews of major gang leaders. In a sense, Batman's other identity can be considered to be deep behind the enemy. And to talk about why Schiller is in such a bad mood, we have to start from this morning. On Marvel's side, although Obadiah was rescued, he was still very weak. Although his heart was running well, as Strange said, he was too old and his body function was too poor. And now he has to stay in the intensive care unit. Stark has been accompanying him, that is his only relative, and even Pepper can't interrupt their father-son relationship. Rhodes left the military temporarily. He said that he had not gone on vacation for several years, so on the eve of Schiller's departure, he and Dr. Eason participated in a scientific research project in Antarctica and left temporarily. New York. Although there are still many unsolved mysteries about the events of Iron Man, everything has calmed down for the time being. So Schiller went back to Gotham. When he came together this morning, he found that the weather in Gotham was exceptionally good. Although there was still a layer of mist, he could see the faint sunlight shining on the ground, which was very rare. So he planned to take advantage of such a great opportunity to use a random chat. After the Iron Man incident, he got another opportunity to chat, but he still had one chat left in the last incident, so he now has two. But in the end, Gotham is worthy of being a ghostly place. Schiller clicked on the chat panel and used random chat. The avatar that appeared had black hair and a green eye patch. Schiller shut down the system almost in a panic. Green Lantern. That's right, it's Green Lantern with the same actor as Deadpool again. Although Deadpool did not appear, it was everywhere. Although Schiller had not seen Deadpool, he was surrounded by Deadpool. I have to ask you, have you seen any bizarre flying objects? I mean, UFOs in the traditional sense. Soon, Green Lantern sent a message. Schiller judged from this line of text that the Green Lantern Hal might be encountering the fallen alien spaceship, and it was through this incident that he obtained the alien Tuogu's Green Lantern ring. Schiller opened his avatar, and sure enough, Hal's ability could not be replicated for the time being, because he had not yet become Green Lantern. So Schiller replied, I vaguely remember how many times I've seen it. What? Have you seen a UFO? I can recommend a website for you, where there are all such records, you can look through it carefully. I have searched all of them, including the websites that record UFOs all over the world, but all they see are things flying in the sky. Then what did you see? The UFO doesn't fly in the sky, so why is it called a UFO? Oh, of course. Of course it used to fly in the sky. No, nothing, forget it. It seems that Hal also realizes that he should not disclose so much information to a stranger he just met on the forum. After all, if he is found out by the other side and he finds a falling UFO, then he is likely to be arrested by the army. Fang to find. However, Schiller sighed. No matter what abilities the Green Lantern ring can bring him, just that Green Lantern is another Deadpool, he can't accept this. I hope Green Lantern is a character in the comics. But stop being a chatter. In the afternoon, Schiller was in a better mood. At this time, Gordon came to look for him. He asked Schiller, have you seen Falcone recently? That's right, what's wrong? In Gotham, it's not a shame to deal with gangsters, or there's no way anyone can avoid dealing with gangster characters. In Gotham, if you can say a word or two to the Godfather, it is something to be proud of. Gordon said, our new police chief seems to be the Godfather. Of course, that's not surprising. Just I wonder, what is he going to do with this mess? Although I know that Falcone was a radical hawk in the early years, but in recent years, he seems to have a trend of turning conservative. I just want to know in advance where the Gotham Police Department intends to turn. The police chief is the godfather of gangsters. This may sound ridiculous, but in Gotham this is normal. Although Gordon is a good police officer, he knows the ecology of Gotham better than anyone else, so he will not when that reckless Lengtaching intends to overthrow all order by himself. On the contrary, he wanted to find a unique way out of the complicated game, so he had to deal with all forces. I became the governess of the Godfather, responsible for teaching his son. You were right, www.mtlnovel.com. The Godfather has become more conservative in recent years, probably because of his age. I don't think you need to worry about him taking some drastic measures. On the contrary, in a sense, he may help you fight those thorns. Schiller sat down, poured Gordon a cup of coffee and said, last time I went to his house, the heads of several of their families were having a meeting. I heard that the pier in the East has not been peaceful recently. Gordon sighed and said, I just found out that the Edward family, who has been controlling the 5 piers in the East, has undergone internal changes. Little Edward killed his father and fell out with his uncle. You know how important those docks are. 60% of Gotham's smuggled goods come from there. I heard that the Edward family is old enough, a native family born and raised in Gotham, even much earlier than Falcone. It's hard for me to say. I just dealt with a fire incident there yesterday. The new director has been invited by Edward Jr. Today I'm here to ask you, just to know if Falcone is going to intervene in this matter. If he intends to control, will he stand on Little Edward's side? If Little Edward really took over the Edward family, Gordon sighed and said, he is a complete madman, and he won't embargo many dangerous goods like old Edward, and Gotham will be in chaos again. Quote. Someday Gotham won't look like this. Don't worry. The police can't handle this now. It's a big deal that you make 2 more trips to wash the floor. As for your excellency godfather. Schiller shook his head and said, I can only say that Falcone is now more like your friend and ally than an enemy. He doesn't want Gotham to be in chaos even more than you do. The cool rain in Gotham's late autumn fell, causing a dim yellow fog to float under the lit street lamps. The cold light of the car lights gradually spread from the corner, illuminating the end of the dark alley. The colorful colors of the neon lights reflected on the black body. The door opened, the driver walked down with a black umbrella, went to the back seat to open the door. The waiters at the entrance of the mansion were all wearing white shirts and champagne-colored vests. They ran over quickly, spread the carpet under the door, stepped on the carpet, and Schiller held the door and got out of the car. As soon as he stood up straight, he saw a guest walking in front of him throwing a huge umbrella into the arms of a thin umbrella boy. The umbrella boy was soaked with a lot of water droplets on the umbrella. The waiters by the gate all laughed at him in a low voice. Schiller took the umbrella himself and walked to the door. A blonde manager came out enthusiastically and said, Is that Professor Rodriguez? His Excellency Godfather is already waiting for you. As soon as he finished speaking, Evans walked down the stairs, hugged Schiller warmly, and said, Thank you, Professor Schiller, my bar mitzvah is not worth the trouble you have to rush here. Quote, It's nothing, happy birthday. The two were talking, and out of the corner of Schiller's eyes, he caught a glimpse of the umbrella boy who was holding a huge umbrella. He should look about the same size as Evans, but he was thin and small, with a hooked nose and some eyes. Shady, unpleasant looking, he is trying to close the huge umbrella in his arms, but because he is very thin, his movements look a bit funny. Schiller noticed that the cufflinks on his wrist were meticulous, and he was more like a dignitary who came to a party than a waiter. Evans was a little unhappy when he saw that Schiller was still carrying the umbrella himself. He also turned to look at the umbrella boy. The manager was very observant. Over that huge umbrella. The umbrella in Schiller's hand was already folded. He held the middle part of the umbrella and handed it to the umbrella boy. The man rolled up his cloudy eyes, glanced at Schiller, and lowered his head. The head took the umbrella with a noob. This little episode did not affect the progress of Evan's birthday party in the slightest. To some surprise, Bruce also came. Of course, after all, they were classmates, and they were in the same class. They were all in the upper class of Gotham. Schiller was holding a glass of wine and was talking with Evans about the club. Soon, the protagonist of the banquet was called away by his father, and Bruce came over and said, Aren't you going to have something to eat first? Professor. Schiller shook his head and asked him, You said last time that you wanted to be the head of the club. That's really strange. As soon as Bruce was about to speak, he heard Schiller say again, Judging from the level of papers you handed in, let alone being the head of a society, you may not be very suitable for studying psychology. Don't do this, of course you know why I did it. But that's not the reason why you polluted my eyes with a pile of academic garbage. Okay. How many clubs group fees can make you shake your academic persistence? Is $200 million enough? Schiller scolded inwardly, but he still said, I suggest you change your way of disguise. Can you really tolerate this way of being among the rotten people all day? I always use juice instead of alcoholic beverages, and those burning powders are just ordinary spices. Schiller didn't speak, just silently lowered his eyes to his waist. Bruce said, Well, there are indeed some problems. Just as he was talking, the lights in the center of the banquet hall turned on one by one, and Falcone took Evans down the stairs in the center. This is an important part of the coming-of-age ceremony. The elder introduces his child to his social circle to show that he can participate in social activities normally and assume the mission of inheriting the family industry. Afterwards, Schiller and other elders gave Evans some encouragement, and finally Evans himself. He first drew a cross on his chest very devoutly, and then thanked God. Just as Evans was speaking, Schiller found that in the peripheral vision on his right, under the shadow of the heavy curtain, there seemed to be a thin figure hidden. But after the crowd gathered in the center dispersed, the figure disappeared. After that, we entered the normal dance and banquet process. The lights were shining, the cups were staggered, and in the splendid banquet hall, people were chatting with their own thoughts. But just like how Schiller was treated at Shield, almost no one would come to talk to him, everyone knew his amazing resume, and no one wanted to stay too long in front of someone who might see through their inner secrets. After a while, the banquet came to an end. Schiller felt a little hungry. He planned to go to the dining table next to him to get something to eat. At this time, he heard some noise from the back of the stairs on the right. Soon, a gorgeously dressed man appeared. The lady in the skirt ran out screaming, "Old Edward! He's down in the bathroom." Everyone around hurriedly dispersed. Falcone said in a calm voice, "Be quiet, Andy, go and see what's going on." A person next to the Godfather walked away, and soon, he came back and whispered a few words in Falcone's ear. Falcone's eyes swept over everyone present, forced by his momentum, no one dared to speak out. Falcone said, "Old Edward died, at my son's bar mitzvah." In the banquet hall with hundreds of people, it was as quiet as if nothing existed. No one even dared to breathe loudly. Everyone was thinking, who was so daring to rush to the Godfather's turf? Falcone said with a cane, "Where's little Edward? Let him come to see me. His uncle died here, he must come here. Also, go to the police station and ask them to send someone to investigate. Evans, please help me entertain the guests and don't let them feel neglected." After that, Falcone gave his assistant Andy a look, then turned and left. Bruce stood beside Schiller and asked him, "You saw that too, didn't you?" "Yes, but it has nothing to do with me." Bruce said, "It seems that little Edward has won, and the situation at the pier will be chaotic." "You think little Edward moved the hand? He's the one who makes the most money, isn't he?" Schiller shook his head and said, "I think the Edward family is the biggest loser. When old Edward died, everyone would think it was his nephew who moved the hand. And something like this happened at the Godfather's only son's coming-of-age ceremony. It's not too much to take revenge on the Edward family after the Godfather. Do you think Falcone directed and acted? He's smarter than you think." Bruce glanced back. The banquet hall, which was still very lively just now, was completely deserted at this time. Most of the people had left. They did not dare to stay here because of the Godfather's anger. Under the brilliant lights, it looked even more desolate. When Schiller was about to leave, it was the assistant next to the Godfather who returned the umbrella to him. Andy said, "I'm sorry, Professor, the Godfather asked me to convey my apology for him. We didn't expect to invite you to the first banquet. That's what happened." "Yes, we didn't even think about it." Schiller looked down at his umbrella. All the water droplets on it had dried. Standing under the porch, he saw a group of people carrying a box at the side door of the mansion, which should be the body of old Edward. They loaded the box into the car and looked at the direction the car was going. His body should have been thrown into the sea. Schiller stood at the door for a while, and soon the police lights flashed in the rainy night, and the police car drove in. That's right, Gotham is like this. They don't wait for the police to come to deal with the body. Gordon came to a crime scene where neither the victim nor the murderer had a trace. They had even wiped off the blood, but he was very adaptable, orderly commanding a few police officers under him, and started in the bathroom, wander around. And he himself, neither handling the case nor recording, but led by others to meet Falcone. The outcome of the investigation in this case does not depend on what actually happened in the bathroom or what the police can find out, but only on the attitude of one person, Falco, the host of the banquet. Inside. Gotham is like this. When a gang member kills another gang member, the situation of the police will become very embarrassing. Gordon deeply understands this truth. When a police officer in Gotham, the psychological quality is more important than the method of solving the case. After a while, Evans came out with an umbrella. He hurriedly ran in the direction of Schiller and said, "Professor, I heard that you haven't left yet. Do you have anything else to do?" "No, nothing special. You know, I'm more interested in these cases." Evans showed a somewhat embarrassed look and said, This is just a small case, not a serial murder case, but if you are interested, you can go in and see." Schiller shook his head, but he handed Evans the umbrella in his hand and said, "Help me bring it to the Godfather." Evans took the umbrella and felt a little inexplicable. After Schiller left, Falcone took Schiller's black umbrella from Evans and said, "It seems that he will indeed be your longest-lived tutor." Sitting in the car on the way back, Schiller listened to the sound of the rain beating on the window, and he recalled the small and cowardly umbrella boy, the guest who went in before him and teased the umbrella boy with a huge umbrella. It was Edward Sr. As soon as Schiller returned to the apartment, he heard movement on the balcony. Batman was standing there. Schiller didn't look back. Batman said, "I'm going to investigate old Edward's case." "Why? Gang fights are also within your jurisdiction. He used to be the head of Park Street." Schiller didn't answer him, but Batman said to himself, "He knows who killed my parents. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more."